describe Lagos Business School. And therefore, as part of the community of Lagos Business School, we expect that every member of that community will be focused and committed to ensuring that we develop professional managers for Africa and also that we influence society. And how do we go about influencing society? By all the things that I hope that you have learned or that have been strengthened by your time at Lagos Business School. When you attend any of the programs at Lagos Business School, we make bold to say that in terms of the content, you will get the same as you get in any world-class business school in the world. And we make that promise because we have attained international accreditations from the 2 topmost accrediting bodies in the world. And we will only get that accreditation if they believe that the quality that we offer is the same as offered in top business schools of the world. But where we're different is that we talk about the peculiarities of doing business in Nigeria and Africa.
Program started because of the gap we found in the marketplace, that NGOs, or non-for-profit organizations, are critical players in the sustainability space because many private sector companies actually make use of the services of NGOs to actualize their sustainability strategy. Unfortunately, we found a lot of skills gap in these organizations in terms of the way they are run, not being very professional. One of the biggest issues is being able to run these businesses and have succession. And succession means getting young people into the space. So the program focuses on training people who are not more than 35 years so that their interests can be enkindled in this and also get them to become the future leaders in the social space.
And in where are we now, you also look at your environment. And in looking at your environment, we use what is called PESTA. So when you're looking at your environment, under this external, we call it, some people call it PEST. You look at the political environment. How would it change? You look at economic. And then you look at S, socio-cultural. What's going on? Are people's attitude changing?
Before I came to LBS, we do a lot, but we're a little bit casual about how we do it because we have our daily jobs. So what we do is to commit the little extra time that we have. With the training I've gone through, I know that there's a lot more that I can do because the more structured and organized the charity is, the bigger the impact, and that's what we are after.
The kind of feedback we've gotten so far shows that they have actually improved in terms of having good organizational structures and processes. Many of them now understand what's expected of them, how they can engage with various stakeholders, how they can render better service to the private sector and their partners.
So prior to coming to the NPLM program in Lagos Business School last year, one of the major problems we had was structure was a bit of problem because this was our first entrepreneurial experience. I'm a co-founder, I have a co-founder as well, and we had not really had this core knowledge of how corporate structure worked, especially for social enterprises. And coming down here, we could see how we could outrightly merge our focus on impact with our focus to be sustainable and make profit, and at the same time create a good structure around that.
I used to think like money was my challenge, so if I could get there and learn how to write for brands and, and have more money, it would help. But then I came and it was like somebody was selling my story. Every facilitator who came is as if they x-rayed me, they opened me up, and they were showing my challenge. Like, this is what you're doing wrong. This is how you ought to do it.
I want to say a big thank you to Ford Foundation for supporting this program, and to Lagos Business School for the quality of the faculty they put together, and even the content that we have been able to learn from. I'm sure that going back to my organization, a whole lot of things is going to change. And I'm sure that this program will really bring about significant transformation in the organization that I lead.
The finest quote I've seen is that non-profits think like non-profits. That's the problem. And that really is the problem. So now I'm thinking with a business mind. I'm following my heart to do what my heart wants in terms of making people happy. But then there's a business aspect of it. So we are transiting from an NGO to a social enterprise, because if we look at it as a business, if we work towards a sustainable future, it will be to the advantage of both the beneficiaries and the donors. So sustainability is something that has been ringing in my mind since I came here.
Madalira kuti wina wake akhoza kukupatsa koma panopo sidaliranso munthu ya ganizana kuti ineyo ndimalimbikitsa anthu kukapha nyama mu gemu, ngakhale timapanga choncho kusintha kunalibe chifukwa timavutikabe chifukwa chithandizo chimene timapeza sinali chokwanirayo. Izo timangopanga chifukwa chakusadziwa. Alangizi amatifotokozera kuti mukasamalira nkhalango yanu yamajere, umphawi umene muli nawowo udzatha ndithu. Ineyo ndinakhala nacho chidwi choti kodi munthu ungasinthe bwanji maganizo. Choncho ndidabwera kuno ku nyumba ndinadzawuza mayi zokuti pali munthu umene akuti tisinthe maganizo, ndiye panopo timakhalira limodzi, timapanga mapulani limodzi. 13 ndidapeza ku marumba anga okwanira 25 bakisi achimanga. Pamene 15 ndinapeza 45. 16 to 17 nkhani yake ndimene mukuona sindikuti ndipeza angati koma ndipeza kuwachuluka chifukwa ngakhale nyumbamo kuti ndi nkhani yakale silingapitenso kumene ukapha nyama chifukwa ndife anthu ndithu odziyimira parokha. Komanso kusamalira ana ku sukulu sitikumavutika, amene sindikuvutika naye kwambiri pa nkhani ya mafizi. Kudza mtsogolo ndi ulimi umene ndikupanga, ndikufuna aphunzire kupita patsogolo. Cholinga changa ngati mapulani atsogolo ndikufuna adzakhale dokotala amene. Panopo tumva kukoma chifukwa choti china chiyonse timachidziwa pamene chili kuti tikapanga chonchi tithandizika motere. Zinthu zili m'nyumba mwathu momwemo. Ya, ndiye tumva kukoma kwa basi.
Well, it gives me very great pleasure to welcome you to the International Sustainability Conference.
Today, I was asked to come and share what the company is doing in the space of sustainability when it comes to plastic, recycling, and so forth. The goal was to highlight three things. So number one, you would have to consider the waste that's already currently in our environment. Number two was sharing the company's circularity strategy about how we envision the waste come in the future. And number three, how we partner with others.
But we all know that SME is a bedrock of the economy. So if we don't have sustainable and affordable electricity for even the SMEs, we will have huge energy poverty in the country.
Sustainability is the way forward, and that's the way to really protect our planet from the projected catastrophic effect of the climate and the planet.
It's been an interesting conference because the topic innovation is something that most people, we talk about it, but we don't actually know what it means for many people. But to come to a conference whereby the practicalities of innovation and sustainability are really addressed by professionals in their field with very clear examples, it's actually quite important.
The panel I chaired, when we talked about creating sustainable business model to combat and end poverty, absolutely is a way to go, because a lot of business models have been tested in the market and they're working. So the next thing is, how do we then scale? That's the way I see us tackling poverty in Nigeria and to position Nigeria as one of the leading African countries.
The whole idea was see how companies who are operating here can focus on the bottom of the pyramid, but actually realizing that by practicing sustainability effectively in that sector, they can still grow the business and make money.
The conference is really an opportunity for people involved in sustainability across the spectrum to come together, to network, to pick up new ideas of how to drive sustainability in our world today.
Thank you very much for honoring us with your presence. We're very grateful to the partner for this forum, Dow Chemicals, for supporting LBS Sustainability Center, to all our speakers and panelists for joining us today, even traveling from far distances. We're very grateful to you.
Well, hello everyone. Good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world you're joining us from. My name is Oreva Ataya. I manage the Lagos Business School Sustainability Center, and we're very, very excited to be hosting you today at the 2020 International Sustainability Conference. To kick us off, I would like to welcome our Deputy Dean, Professor Chris Obeche. Prof.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all of you. I hope you are keeping well and staying safe in a COVID-infested world. Wherever you are, we are happy that you are part of us today. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2020 edition of the Lagos Business School International Sustainability Conference. I'm glad you are able to join us today. The International Sustainability Conference is an annual dialogue platform to inspire business leaders to embed sustainability and responsible business practices in the organization's strategy and operations to make a positive impact, not only on their business performance, but also on society as well. The conference comes at a unique time when the global economy continues to battle with the adverse impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. It also comes at a time when Nigeria is recovering from the social and economic shocks of the recent NSAS mass demonstrations across the country. The pandemic has taught us that people and organizations are interconnected and responsible to one another and to society. And as such, business leaders should go beyond short-term profits. Business and society are therefore two sides of the same coin. And so it is time for us, business leaders, to actually drive purpose, to run purpose-driven organizations. Creating value for all stakeholders by having a positive social impact is a bold decision that leadership teams of organizations must make today. Several countries, including Nigeria, have recently experienced civil unrest, which further compounds the volatility in today's business environment. The plethora of problems in the world today further emphasize the need for sustainable development. Basically, development that meets the needs of the present, but does not take away the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So today, we'll be discussing and deliberating on strategies various actors and players can employ for sustainable economic recovery, especially in regards to job creation, resilience of micro, small, and medium enterprises, and food systems to address hunger. Underlining our discuss today is this thought: micro, small, and medium enterprises remain the bedrock for the growth of any country's economy, particularly in emerging markets like Africa, contributing to the country's development, job creation, and export, amongst others. According to the World Bank, MSMEs represent 90% of businesses and more than 50% of employment worldwide. Formal SMEs contribute up to 40% of national income in emerging economies. COVID has adversely affected most of these organizations and their ability to strive. As a result, MSMEs are closing down and unemployment is soaring. Stay-at-home policies have led to restrictions on movement and decreased incomes, increasing poverty, and therefore we have inflation and sometimes unbearable cost of living for the very vulnerable. Over the next 2 hours, I encourage you to stay logged in, share your thoughts and ideas in the chat box, and ask a lot of questions via the Q&A section. Have a pen and a notebook close by to take some notes and document your lessons. I would like to say a big thank you to our wonderful lineup of speakers, participants, partners, participating organizations, and the Sustainability Center team who have worked tirelessly to put this together. Welcome to the 2020 International Sustainability Conference, and I wish you all a wonderful learning experience and fruitful deliberation. Over to you, Rebecca.
Great. Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you very much for those inspiring words. We believe definitely the next 3 hours will be a great time sharing thoughts and also learning for everyone. I would like to just go through some ground rules. I know we've put some instructions and we sent you some joining instructions before you joined. But just to remind everyone, you'll be able to ask your questions and make contributions later on at the Q&A session of each of the 2 sessions we have today. So you would please be asked to use your raise hand button so that we can call on you to speak. But even while the sessions are going on, please, I encourage you to put your thoughts in the chat box and put your questions in the Q&A so that we can have them documented and our session chairs can address them with the speakers. Today we have a huge lineup of speakers, and I hope you've gone through your e-brochure to see their bios. Very interesting work and great impactful work they're doing all over the world. So if you haven't, please look in the chat box. You see the link to the e-bio where you can see the details for today's proceedings. At this point, I would like to call on our session chair, Dr. Jubril Adeojo, to begin our session on the topic Sustainable Recovery from COVID-19, Policies and Business Solutions for Job Creation in Emerging Markets. Jubril?
All right. Thank you so much, Oreva. Good morning, everyone. Good day, good afternoon, good evening. It's my delight to be with everybody today and to be sharing such a very rich dialogue on sustainable recovery from COVID-19, looking at policies, business solutions that will steer job creation in emerging markets, like for example, Africa. And before I go into the conversation, I will be making some a very short presentation and to set the tone into what we'll be discussing in the panel. Can you please share my presentation, however? And you know, this conference truly is coming at the right time. And the theme of the conference is also very well thought through. Because, you know, for the past 11 months now, conversations have been about post-COVID recovery. But truly, this recovery is a very vague word to use. But we need to start to qualify what kind of recovery do we want to see in Africa. You know, so the use of sustainability is also actually very, very important. And the first slide we have in front of us now is just to look at what the global diagnosis is like, looking at the sectoral exposure to COVID-19. This was a research done by Moody's. It's a global perspective. I'm sure some of us will have seen this before, or some of them are very obvious analysis. You can see that the highly exposed sectors are sectors from airlines to leisure, tourism, to automotive suppliers, to apparel. And this just tells you that people, consumers, citizens are now focusing largely on essential services and products, right? So people are saving more money. People are buying just food, you know, no time for relaxation. So that is really affecting such sectors. Then if you look at the moderate exposed sectors, you realize that these are beverages, also not the so-called essential, sectors, right? These are sectors that also rely on the sector that interfaces directly with the citizens and consumers. So they're also moderately exposed. Then if you look at the low exposure, you will see that these are now where we have the essentials. Because even if I want to go and buy essential services and products, the money I will budget for it now will be less than what I used to budget for such expenditure. So what that basically tells us again is that I would rather save money than to spend money. Also, because the fact again that a lot of people are also losing their jobs. Those that even have jobs are experiencing reduced income, reduced salaries. And this is happening at the corporate level, even at the SME level, because we have more SMEs are the largest employer of labor across anywhere in the world, particularly in Africa as well. You know, so they are the ones that are really taking these severity measures internally and then affecting the disposable income of their employees, you know, then affect the purchasing power of such individuals. And, you know, the future now is the companies that are not really feeling this impact, well, they're feeling the impact in a positive way, are the internet service companies, people that are in very virtual data. These are companies, and because all of us are still going about our businesses, but we're not moving from in-person or just like we're doing this conference now to a virtual space. So that kind of sector is really booming, and also a delivery sector too is also booming. Moving very quickly to the next slide. And this next slide just tries to bring in home, next slide, please. So this tries to bring it home to why we are here, right? Which is, okay, we've seen the global diagnostic and we've seen the sectoral exposure. So let's bring it down to the SDGs, right? We have the 17 SDGs, but very, very quickly, I will just go through a very few ones. The first one of zero poverty. Now, because of the fact that income is reduced, people that used to earn even not to decent income, they're even facing salary cuts, right? We have people losing their jobs. We have businesses closing up. So that is not expanding the poverty net across the world. And again, Africa is not immune to that, okay? Because it's a global village. So even if we don't have a lot of cases of COVID or mortality rate in Africa, doesn't mean that we're not affected by the global disruption of the supply chain, because Africa relies a lot of importation. So that has expanded the poverty net. And you know, when there's no money, you can't buy food to eat, you know. And again, a lot of the benefactors, people that have money, that give money to the dependents, are also experiencing a lot of reduced income. So there's not enough money to go around to even help people that ordinarily would rely on someone. So that is also affecting a lot of things. And again, with the COVID, it's a deadly virus. We all know that. So, and when you have an unhealthy economy, there's no way you have anything productive. So it's also very important that we get people very, very healthy. And very, very quickly to SDG 7, you know, that talks about affordable energy and clean energy. Everybody is indoors. Energy is one of the highly demanded or consumed commodity around the world. This is now an opportunity for us to get new entrepreneurs that can develop solutions that will that will provide clean and renewable energy to the people to use. But another question is that, can they afford to pay? At what rate will they pay, considering the fact that income is also depressed? So it's not easy, but these are conversations that we need to have towards really having that conclusion of how do we really achieve a sustainable recovery. And very quickly to the climate action. Yeah, everybody that know me know I'm always very biased when it comes to climate change. There's nothing I talk about that I don't bring in climate change. And the reason is this. Yes, we are experiencing reduction in carbon footprint. Yes, we're happy as someone like myself, for example, right? I care about the climate a lot. However, this is an artificial reduction, meaning that it's not sustainable. It happened all because we have reduced transport. For example, air transportation has reduced drastically. So airplanes are not polluting the environment anymore. People are not moving from point A to point C very often anymore. So that's also cutting down carbon reduction. However, we are saying to ourselves that how can we make such cuts? Because combating climate change by cutting down CO2 is also very critical for economic growth and development and transformation. So how do we keep this artificial reduction and make it sustainable? So how can we now say, as we are recovering, as the economy is recovering, how can it be sustainable? How can it be eco and climate friendly? That is what the discussion is all about. And I will conclude with the last slide. However, so this last slide is my favorite slide now. This is my favorite slide now, you know, because, you know, we have the COVID-19 wave. This is the disaster. And what we're being told locally and globally is that just wash your hand, keep good hygiene, and trust me, you'll be fine. But hey, that is just to keep yourself safe. But at the end of the day, the economic reality is that I need to feed my family, feed myself, employ staff if I'm an entrepreneur, something like that needs to keep going. So, and there's now this recession coming in. The recession is imminent, is inevitable, it's coming in. So even when you're safe, you need to feed, you need to eat, you need to do a lot of things. So how do we tackle economy? So, and now we're not saying there's now the biggest wave that why I don't sleep is climate change. No matter how fantastic your roads are, no matter how fantastic your housing or buildings are, no matter how fantastic entrepreneurs are performing, when there's flood, there's chaos. When there is heat waves, there's chaos. So how do we combat the economic recession, okay, in a way that we're also combating climate change in a resilient manner? So that's the kind of conversation we'll be having in the discussion. And we're very lucky because we have a veteran in interacting with entrepreneurs on a regular basis in Nigeria and very good Pan-African experience. We also have a veteran that works very closely with a lot of innovators in climate change having the conversation around how do we marry developing capacity of SMEs in and mainstreaming climate innovation into that, so that at the end of the day, we can achieve what we've set out to achieve in this conference, which is achieving a sustainable recovery post-COVID. So thank you so much. That was my very short presentation. I hope that was exciting and a good way to go into the conversation. So the two speakers we have today on this panel are, we have Mr. Bankole Olawutola, a very close ally of ours in our business. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Climate Innovation Center. We also have with us Nneka Okeke-Oaru, Deputy Director of the Enterprise Development Center. I apologize if I didn't pronounce the name well. The first thing I'll just ask is, I would like the two of you to just introduce what your company has been doing since inception before I then go into the main question. So I will let Nneka start, please. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Jubril. And I will fine you for ruining and murdering my husband's name. It's okay, Karu. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody tuning in from all over the world. It's a pleasure to be here. So just like Jubril said, my name is Nneka. I head gender and I'm Deputy Director at the Enterprise Development Center. And we're the Entrepreneurship Center of Pan-Atlantic University. In the last 20 years, what we have focused on is deepening the competencies and capacities of entrepreneurs. In the last 17 years, we've worked with almost 130,000 entrepreneurs, strengthening their competencies and capacities, helping them put in structures, processes and systems so that they're more sustainable, so that they can better cope with COVID and other crises that come into play. It's been an exciting and interesting journey. I think we've learned from it as well. So I'd like to say that we have a very vibrant community of entrepreneurs doing different things and playing in different sectors. So that's just about it.
Thank you so much. Bankole?
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Bankole, and I'm the Innovation Center. And at the EDC, I'm a landlord, so we all work from the same organization, and we learn a lot from what EDC is doing. So the NCIC has been set up by as a joint collaboration between the World Bank and the government of Nigeria, but we work autonomously, and we are part of a network of CICs across Africa, which there is Ghana, Kenya, Ethiopia, and South Africa, I think. So our main essence is to drive that growth of innovative solutions that can help to combat, mitigate, or help us adapt to climate change. But for us, again, what we see is that while we're building enterprises and also, supporting ecosystems, we also need to understand that they need to be a business model that will help for sustainability. So we have a flagship program called the Embryo Incubation Program, and which currently we have done about three cohorts. The last cohort we had were about 12 startups, mainly focused on renewable energy sector, which is being sponsored by Olon. And this year we hope to have about 30 startups altogether from different sectors. So far we have, to incubate about over 250 businesses. For us, we think that to understand what the challenges are within every sector and value chain, then we can improve that that opportunity for jobs and that opportunity for for being able to achieve much of our climate goals in the year 2030. Thank you. So I'll wait for the next questions from you, Jibril.
All right, thank you so much, Nneka and Bankole. Thank you for the introduction. Nneka, I'll start with you. And I will say I don't envy the role you play in the supply chain of building SMEs, right? Because But I salute you because, you know, as an investor in the market, right, during this COVID, I just tell my potential company or investee company that we're not investing right now. Everything is so chaotic. But you are the mother of SMEs, right? Even when SMEs are successful or not successful, you have to accommodate them. You know, and there's this thing we all say, even the prof said in the introduction, that SMEs are the engine of every economy in the world. But let me ask you 2 questions or 3 questions in one. The first one is, are they really getting a fair share of the political and the financial environment? That's one. The second thing is, how are they really faring during this COVID period? And what are you doing so far working with them? Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Jubal. And thank you for that new title, Mother of SMEs. I like that. So in response to your question, I think in terms of getting a fair share, I would say probably not. I would look at it from 2 perspectives. So it depends. I spoke at an event yesterday, and I said it, and I'm still saying the same thing, that in the last 10 years, if we look at the kind of support that have been available for entrepreneurs, we've never had it so good. This is the first time in the last 2-3 years where we're seeing all sorts of funds, all sorts of grants coming into the space for entrepreneurs. So from that perspective, it's been good. However, how have they fared? We did a survey during COVID. We had almost 2,000 respondents, and we found that 93% of them had seen a dip of more than 70% by way of revenues. So it's been tough. We all know it's been tough for the entrepreneurs. They've had a tough time, but guess what? They're slowly coming out of that. It's been tough, and they've had to cope. But one thing COVID has done is that it's given everybody a new pair of lenses. So for the entrepreneurs that actually thought that they had a good business, they've realized that they had glorified hobbies. For the entrepreneurs that thought their businesses were so great, they've realized that they've just been surviving based on family and friends that were just hyping them. But really, there was no perceived value from outsiders. For the entrepreneurs who did have value, who had thought through the business they were running, had the right business model, had taken time to put some processes and systems, they were able to cope. And that coping saw them through. So a lot of entrepreneurs have had to rethink a lot of things. And one thing we've done with entrepreneurs is work with them from 3 different perspectives. The first one, around their psyche. A lot of them were going through depression, about to go into depression or coming out of depression. So quite a number of entrepreneurs actually, during March, April, when they had to shut down, they were comatose. They didn't even know what to do. So my team and I, we made a lot of phone calls. We had a lot of Zoom sessions. We had a lot of free sessions, not just for them, but for those of them that had very supportive spouse. We also brought them in, as well as their team, their management team. So we provided that. We had a lot of mental wellness sessions for them. So that's what we did from the psyche and emotional perspective. And then also provided them resources so that they could cope, and a lot of coping strategies. Then from the access perspective, a lot of them, we persuaded them, we encouraged them, and then we showed them how they could access some of the funds that the government had made available. So there's so many funds that were available, some zero interest, some no moratorium and all that. So we provided them that platform so they could access. As I speak, they probably accessed well over 200-300 million. And then lastly, what we did was provide a community by way of connections and connecting them to markets, different types of markets, helping them look at their supply chain, because something COVID did was disrupt supply chains. So that's how we've been working with the ecosystem, and they're coming out of it slowly. I mean, a lot of the large organizations are barely surviving. We've seen so many known brands file for bankruptcy globally. So for them, one thing they have, being small, is a bit more nimble. So we're revisiting everything. We're looking at everything. We're looking at our business model, and one critical thing is looking at cost. all the time to see, what works, what can we take out. So we're letting them understand they need to scrutinize their cost. If you're doing that every quarter or every month, you need to look at that every day, every week, because there's so many changes and they need to be prepared for that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Just to be on that, Nika, because this is an international conference and it's Pan-African as well in nature. Are there any other aspects in Africa, any other countries in Africa are there any things we can learn from them as well that you know about that you can also share with us?
Well, so I think what a lot of countries have been doing, so even on the continent and globally, from the government perspective, would be asking, especially for entrepreneurs that are leasing spaces, we'll be talking to the associations of landlords and all that, and asking for relief on the rents. They've been doing that. We haven't done that in Nigeria. So we could learn from them if you come from that perspective. So we have that. Some of the governments and some of the countries, they're giving some relief packages to the entrepreneurs. And then for some others, the central bank and the financial space, they're waiving a few months, so like 6 months, 9 months. So these are things that are happening globally and on the continent, and these are things I think we can learn from Nigeria, because a lot of entrepreneurs still have to pay the rent, even though they transact for 7 months. That's ridiculous.
Absolutely.
But if you think about it, the landlords don't even have a safety net. So they themselves, that's what they're looking for. So, it's just a vicious cycle.
Thank you so much. Bankole, for us in the climate change part, right, we're happy because carbon footprint is coming down.
It's well reduced, yeah.
However, globally, particularly in developed nations and some developing nations, even some parts in Africa, particularly in Africa, we're talking about the Green Deal, green recovery, not just normal post-recovery. Yeah. So what are those opportunities? Because we're not talking about the green economy, right? So what are the opportunities are there for the green innovators? Because I must commend you and your center, because for the very innovative green innovation talks you've been having during this COVID period. Giving a lot of us in the community access and understanding of what are possible, with green economy innovations. So what are those investment opportunities for investors, even for entrepreneurs, or for even EDC to start grooming the new set of entrepreneurs, right? But that will be promoting and stimulating the green economy, but leveraging on or supplementing what you already have in the economy. Okay, what are the kind of opportunities across the different sectors where you're already very good at? Agriculture, energy, waste, water, you name them. So share some insight, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think first of all, I'd like to thank EDC first of all, right? You see, when Ineka spoke about how they had to look through and help, entrepreneurs look through things like their infrastructure and their rent and all that, EDC did a very great job for us at NCIC, for those 7 months and helping us understand how we need to cut our costs down a bit, and also, helping us understand how we can manage our space and, still be at a very functional mode. So I really want to thank EDC for that help. And for the climate sector, as we've seen over the years, I think what COVID did for many of us that we don't understand is the level of SMEs that have increased in Nigeria. I cannot estimate it, but at the top of my head, I will say it has increased by 10 to 20%, because right now, almost everybody is selling something. And this is the period where we get to see, easier and functional ways, to be able to manage resources. What COVID did again was to help us all, reduce our overhead costs. And I think that if we all continue in this manner of having to, deal with remote work and also, deal with the use of energy and also manage the, the kind of energy that we use, I think we'll see a larger opportunity there. So for us in the renewable energy sector, this is what we have seen. We see that energy efficiency is a very strong thing. We see that energy transition happening also from fossil fuel driven, energy generation to nature-based, energy generation. So what we're finding now is that there are more businesses willing to transition to different forms of renewable energy. And another part of renewable energy that we see that is also showing up opportunity for us here in this sector is in the biofuel market. So throughout the COVID, there was quite a lot of leverage on the solar market. The solar market itself it's not yet and will not be saturated, not in any time soon. I think that the solar market will continue to reinvent itself till it becomes that sustainable market that we can use, to be able to grow. During the COVID period, we saw a Nigerian company signing a multi-million dollar deal. I think that's Oxano through Olon, to be able to set up a manufacturing company. And so we see that right, that energy sector cannot dwindle. Rather, the market in that energy sector, what will happen now is that for us at the NCIC, what we look for is to help to scale those businesses that are using renewable energy to perform certain services. So we will see that shift from just people who want to just generate energy to people who want to use renewable energy to solve several other challenges. So we have people who solve, post-farmer losses, using solar powered cold room chains. We have those ones also who are using water, solar to be able to power irrigation. We have those who are also using old body car parts, and also battery to be able to power keke. These are all these guys who have come through this space because energy efficiency is going to be very key in the new normal, right? So when people are looking for how they can, place investment within the energy sector, they should look at things that can improve use, that can manage and make use a lot more efficient, and can also facilitate, functionality and efficiency in other places. Those are the areas that I think that many people should look out for. And within the circularity area, which is the waste management, just waste management alone is not all. There needs to be that circular use of waste to be able to generate several other opportunities. And I think that the immense opportunity in this circular economy, we have not even tapped up to 3% of what is possible in Nigeria. Energy waste can be turned into energy. Waste can also be turned into several other things. So we have a partner, or rather, a friend of the NCIC who is using waste also, to be able to generate things like lifestyle products. Is using waste also, to generate energy to be able to power several other sectors. And so we see that circular part of things. It could be fashion, it could be agric waste, it could be human waste, solid waste. So we find businesses who are also converting their solid waste into gas, to be able to use for cooking, right? And we see that part of circularity when it comes to energy, where we'll see again is that there will be a large investment in clean cooking stove in the coming year of 2021, because again that the waste that is being generated within the agri sector, from the human solid waste, and also every type of waste that you can find, can also be converted into briquettes, and this will be the things to fuel the new clean cooking gas emerging economy that is happening in Africa currently. And within the water side also, we see that water, again, not many people have truly understood water, but we think that the water market from safe and access to clean drinking water to also sanitation, right, is going to be very key. And also water for transportation is also going to be very key, particularly dealing with mega cities like Lagos and other cities who are by the coastal region. What we see is that water for health and also water for impact is also going to be very huge. Around the side of climate smart agriculture, we see that there will be a lot more lean growing methods that are going to be happening, right? If a few more greenhouses are going to pop up, who are going to deal mainly more on perishable goods, and also those what do you call them? Fancy fruits and products like strawberry, kale, and all these different ones. I think that all this greenhouses are going to leverage more on solar, to be able to excel. So for us, we see these opportunities very abound, and we see that there's going to be an increase in sustainable buildings, and also going to be an increase also in mobility. So using plastic to power motorcycles, using plastic to power vehicles, I think that we see a lot more opportunity within this space in the coming year. And for us, what we've seen what SMEs can do, or the opportunities that is available for SMEs, again, is that SMEs are the lifeline, just like everyone has said. And SMEs again feed the value chain. They are the ones that sit within the value chain. And so for us to be able to scale this market, what we tell the businesses that come to us is that create a system whereby you can convert the non-consumption market, and so that people will begin to buy from other people from your product. And so, which is what we've told those within the clean cooking stove market, that look, if you make your briquettes easy to purchase with a beautiful distribution, strategy, because briquettes are a lot cheaper than charcoal, they're a lot cheaper than kerosene. And so when we use briquette as an example first, we said, how long can you cook a pot of beans? Again, we know that pot of beans takes about 4 hours or 3 hours or so, right? So how can you cook? What would it cost you to cook a pot of beans? So if we do that analysis, right, briquette actually costs a lot less and burns less and burns faster, to be able to, but again, the purchase of the clean stove is where the issue is. So the business model around there now is that we need to find a way to scale that accessibility purchase of cooking stove, whereby we can also, so more people can have access to your outdoor grills, whatever it is. If you use more of briquettes, right, they have a way of keeping us sustainable and even open up that market for that, for that circularity. So I think that COVID, for as bad as it was, COVID has also created a lot of opportunities for people, because many people during this stage got to realize how entrepreneurial they were. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Banker. Before you leave, just to build on that very quickly. So, me, I like to just try to map things together, right? So that we can see how we can move on very quickly.
Yeah.
And what I always say is that, entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneurs are people that have a blunt cutlass and they want to just bang in on the tree. They don't have that time to sharpen that, even if that sharpening takes 2 years or 3 years. So what I'm saying is this: it is the demonstration and pilot phase. Okay? It is how well we're able to execute demonstration and pilot that will determine how we scale. Now, for that pilot and demonstration stage, what we now need to do is, how do we leverage on our current network? So you sit right there, you're very close to EDC. You have over 30,000 SMEs they've worked with across different sectors. Green economy is about how do you add value to all these sectors to either decarbonize them in terms of mitigation or make them resilient and adaptive to climate change. So how can we start to identify some green innovators within your space, your network, that can add some value to some of these 30,000 SMEs to do some pilots and demonstration? So the success of that pilot will now inform how we scale them in terms of bringing in more capital, right? That is what's nice. And one more thing before you respond to that, maybe Nneka can also add to that, is what are the kind of value exchange or knowledge transfer programs do you do currently with other innovation centers where they're doing quite well in green economy? Thank you.
So for me first, right, this is what I will say. I will say that the green economy, right, is that economy where many people are still skeptical about whether it's going to be sustainable or not. And most SMEs, when you find out, already have a detailed process of how they would like to execute their businesses. So for us, what we've seen again is that the businesses that we deal with are businesses that are supposed to improve the efficiency of these SMEs. It could be in charge, in terms of energy, or in terms of their waste, their waste management, or even in terms of logistics, for many of them. So when we see these opportunities, right, we build businesses where we identify challenges within value chain or sectoral, issues, and then we push our businesses to try and tackle, the kind of solutions, the kind of challenges that you find within that solutions. In the early part of next year, we will start a program with the Dutch consulate in Lagos, which is the circular, the circular hackathon, and that is because and we're asking them what their challenges are. Because again, when you speak to the leader of an industry, the leader of that industry, if the leader has got a problem, then that means almost everybody else playing within that space is likely going to have that problem. So when you provide a green solution to that problem, you have opened up a whole new market for both that startup and whoever is playing within the value chain. And that is what we are really targeting on in the year 2021. In terms of the businesses, and the kind of capacity building, right? For us, we do that kind of, sessions where we try to help businesses understand the benefit of having to go green. But again, when you're going to go green and you're looking at SMEs, you know that SMEs first things first is triple line, triple bottom line, or rather bottom line of the organization. Am I going to make more profit, and is this not going to cost me more money? So which is why we're talking to green businesses, particularly those in the energy sector, to rethink their business model and see how we can improve this energy transition by making it easier for other people to be able to access this business. Yes, we know you want to make your money quickly, right? It is really advisable for businesses to make your money quickly. But you have to decide, do you want to keep this inventory this long, or you want to push it out for more inventory to come? And then you continue to support and build on the kind of relationship you had, with your business. And I think we're making it, some form of grounds. And what we also do again is that we look at the businesses that we have and we try to push them in those different sectors where they can, where they can make an improvement. So one of our businesses called Sponvertech is the one providing, irrigation through solar. And what we've done for Sponvertech again is by taking him to NERSA and tell NERSA, that's the Nigerian risk sharing lending agency, right? NERSA, that they're in charge of agri. And what we've helped them understand is that if Sponvertech is able to help your farmers have access to water any time of the year, right? Without that high cost of maintenance and engine and fuel costs on the side of the farmers. Would you like to do that business and also support your farmers that way? Now that opportunity is coming up for Sponvertech. So if we keep showing up at different clusters and sectors and providing opportunities, and at the same time advising those in that system why it is more efficient for you to use something that is green because of because of the cost, right? Adoption might be expensive, but in the long run, the overhead cost for you is going to be a lot less. But there are countless models that are happening currently, and we're really tweaking and retweaking different models as we can find around. On that part of capacity building for SMEs, I think NECA is a lot stronger, to be able to share that, that thought. And I like the name you gave her also, Mother of SMEs. So I'll let Mama SME carry on the conversation.
I'm taking the baton from you. So thank you, Bankole. So just to add to what Bankole has said, Jubril, I think what we've started doing is the conversation. So we need to realize that they've been doing things a particular way. So we've introduced a conversation series focusing on sustainability and circularity. We've done case studies on entrepreneurs such as themselves on circularity. And we're now having those conversations and showing them that, look, it is possible to be green and still be sustainable. And that means looking at every single component of their business, from hiring all the way to when the customer gets the service or gets the product, looking at every little bit. So how you're managing your waste, how you're getting even your supplies. I know you don't want to have the conversation around carbon footprint because you don't think that you're a big player, but you need to start thinking about that. If your staff are coming to the office, are they coming in separate cars? Can we start thinking about carpooling? Can we even think about how we have more inverters and solar panels rather than using the generator and sending the fumes into the space? So those are the conversations that we've been having, and it's really around changing their mind. It's not easy, so it's a day at a time, but we're seeing significant improvements in some of them. They've taken the plunge. For quite a number, they're looking at this whole 2020 as a year for reset. So they're resetting, they're rejigging a lot of things, and that's what they're looking at. So yeah, so the conversation continues, and Bankole is in the building with us. We have within our pool of 100 and something thousand entrepreneurs, we also have a lot of green entrepreneurs. So it actually makes that conversation easier. So those that are the recycling, they've been introduced to all the entrepreneurs. So they're picking up their waste, they're having that conversation. Those that are doing solar and biofuels, so we have some that are using waste cooking oil. They've blended that and they are using that for their diesel. So that's in the southeastern part around Abawari. So those kind of people we've plugged them into NERSA as well, so they can access and scale up. So it's an ongoing process. but it's a conversation that we need to continue having, and we need to keep communicating. So it's not just communicating with the entrepreneurs, but also their staff, which actually has been the major challenge a lot of entrepreneurs have had this whole year. Yes, we know that they need funding, but a lot of them have seen that talent is a major challenge. Just trying to, because a lot of them are working with talent that they can afford. A lot of them got talent that they hadn't really thought about what they really needed. So that really has been the major challenge. So we're having these conversations with the entrepreneurs, but we're pulling in their team as well so they can understand, especially from a waste reduction perspective.
Thank you so much, Nneka and Bankole. So at this junction, we've moved to, so we're now we're responding to questions that we have from the audience. Right now we have just one, and that one is to Bankole. And here goes the question. Is the business case for green growth well understood by entrepreneurs? How do we communicate the value proposition to investors and other stakeholders? I mean, Nneka, also after Bankole, feel free to just chip, because you know what I always say is this: whether it is green or not green, you have to sell value. So maybe you can also comment from the angle of your experience in the last two decades into how do you sell value really to investors and other stakeholders that we can learn from. Bankole, go ahead. Bankole, are you there? Okay. I think Bankole is having network issue. Nneka, do you want to just chip in?
I think the concept of but I can hear you. I can hear you clearly. So what I said is that I think the concept of green growth, right? We shouldn't expect everybody to just jump on it hook, line, and sinker. Entrepreneurs, first things first, or rather businesses in Nigeria, we've been used to a certain type of way of doing business, and that is already a system. And so you cannot load a new system over people without having to. A few mavericks are already jumping on the bandwagon. I think that gives us a very good plus, whereby we can continue to coach others by the success stories that we have seen. This is evangelism, right? For every time there's a new miracle, everybody else will follow you. So I think that for every time there's a new something trying to bring up, eco opportunities, within the project, in pushing strictly energy-related programs, right, around policy, around investments, around ecosystem, and also building value. And then there's FC4S also. That's the Financial Center for Sustainability, which is headed by my friend also Emmanuel Etedai. And they are doing a lot within the banking sector, which also Jubilee are also part of them. You're doing quite a lot of work within the banking sector, helping them understand what it means to have a green fund and what it means to really have a green desk, and why you need to look beyond the everyday way of having to give money to businesses and also think of that large long-term impact of how things can happen. So I think that the green growth dream is already on its way, right? And we shouldn't hope, be in a hurry to see it become like the main fossil fuel economy. But I think that with all the partnership that is happening between from the UK government, from the Dutch government, from the EU government, and also from several other governments across the world, right? Seeing Nigeria as a potential market to be able to create generation of green solution, and at the same time as a market for where they can use that they can connect around green solution. I think that dream of that green growth is already a machinery, that is already functioning currently. And in terms of the investors and investees, right? I think the investors also, when you look at it from the Nigerian perspective, the investors are still trying to be very sure what exactly is going on here, right? Because again, if I use my example, or rather my experience from the tech world, right? So when we started this whole digital startup tech and all that stuff, right? Many Nigerian investors were not too sure, because again, this is not a brick and mortar kind of business. It is software related. It took their time. Now you that to the green sector. The green sector is not an intangible market. It is a brick and mortar market, because many of the solutions you're seeing them glaringly in front of you and how it works. Right? And many of these businesses, even it is a full-time emphasis. Everyone who needs to dwell and trade within the 1 watt solar system, everyone sees what everybody else is doing. So we all understand that, look, this is not your, your typical intangibilities, right? You can see things to it. But average investor in Nigeria is still not sure, is this going to work or not? But I think that with the different resources and the success stories that we are seeing, I know that 2021 will be a different model when it comes to investing in, in the green sector. For everyone who is already looking out to that, you can send us an email if you need to know more. We're all here, to help you, to guide you on the different investment journeys that you'd like to have. Over to you, Neka.
All right, thank you very much, Bankole. So great question, Larry. And in answering that question, no, I don't think the business case for green growth is understood. It has been understood by entrepreneurs as well as the investors as well. So I think that it's still a learning journey. But one thing we can do to communicate the value proposition is storytelling. Storytelling has always worked. It's currently working and will always work. So for the few that we have seen, so that's what we've done. We took one case when we wanted to start the conversation around circularity. Joyce, she makes furniture. So there's zero waste on that farm. And we've turned that into a case study that we're using to persuade entrepreneurs to look at circularity. And I think it's that same storytelling concept that we have to bring for the green growth movement. And that's the only way, because why change? None of us like change. It's been working all these years. Why do I have to do that? Especially when it means that I have to rethink a lot of things, especially when it means that I have to push my talent to go on that same path with me. I'm struggling with it. They will definitely struggle with it. My supply chain, my ecosystem, they're going to struggle. So why bother? So it must be a compelling reason. So we need to use storytelling, get a couple of cases, visualize it, short videos, and just talk about it. And that's the only way. If you think about it, you need to be persuaded to buy something that you've never bought before. You need to be persuaded to do something you've never done before. So why should it be different for my investors and my entrepreneurs? So I think it's something that we're all learning. I think that we can communicate. I think there's a lot of value that has been captured. And I suggest that we adopt storytelling to get the word out there.
I couldn't agree more, Neka, because I call myself a storyteller, because it's very important, campaign was because we entrepreneurs, particularly in the green economy, even when you talk to the UN, when they say green economy, climate change, they talk so much about the social and environmental. But if you're talking about business, it's about the value addition. What are you giving to the market? What is the value? So that is why it's very important we learn from you, because it's not about just being green, it's about a business that needs to be sold. While we wait for new questions, okay, Oliver, go ahead, please. We have someone that wants to ask a question. Go ahead, please. Allow our waiver. Thank you.
Okay, I think our participant is unmuted. You can go ahead, Paul.
Okay, thank you very much, Oliver. My question goes to Mr. Bankole. Listening to the conversation, realize that most of the issues relating to adoption of green growth measures relate to entities that have a direct impact on the environment. So talking about energy producers, for instance, or even those in the agricultural space. But let's take an SME, let's say a microfinance company. How can we make a microfinance company appreciate the need to inculcate or adapt sustainability strategies? And in what ways can adapting sustainability strategies help enhance the profit bottom line for a microfinance company?
All right. So I think for microfinance companies, again, first things first, you need to ask yourself, right? Microfinance companies are out to do what? They're out to help to provide, microfinance or micro lending services to people who are doing it. So first things first, their Naira and Kobo is going to matter, or I don't know what to call it in the Ghanaian side, SEDI, and I don't know what the smaller one is, but that really does matter for them, right? But so first things first, we need to get the management involved. If the management of that microfinance institutions are not driven down, right, are not driven, are not driven down, to be able to understand what it means to drive impact. But even if when you look at the Naira and Kobo, I think that the green sector itself already is carrying out its own finances and its own return on investment. So when you look at what SMEs are doing when it comes to when they are selling solar home systems, or they are selling briquettes, and again they need to buy more, right? Or they are packing waste, or they need to achieve more so that they can get more waste and supply their companies. So first things first, what you need to do, again, setting up a green desk for you, is that you need to identify what does it mean for you to set up a green desk, and also what does a green desk really mean for the kind of people you want to look out for. What kind of businesses are you looking out for in this green desk? First things first, I will ask you, and I would really advise you that you look at the those that are the lowest hanging fruit with a large with a large existing market, right? And those are the only ones who you think you can start as your pilot phase of lending. And this pilot phase of lending is what will open your eyes to see all the other opportunities that are available in this space. For instance, in Nigeria, we want to power 5 million homes, with solar. Now, when you put that, when you double that, right, you will need to have additional solar home system devices, or devices that rely on solar to be able to excel. So there's a whole new market when people are selling devices, right? And when people are also producing devices. So for the microfinancing institutions, first of all, they need to truly understand which market they are really diving into, because again, the market, the market dynamics are also about the same thing, right? It's about buying and selling. So if you want to buy, or you're looking at a green market, look for those ones who are the lowest hanging fruit with a large consumption market before you start looking for those with the non-consumption market. Let the innovation side of things open up the non-consumption market so that you can continue to learn to them after they have been converted into a more into a formal consumption market. Does that answer your question in any way?
Okay. Thank you, Bankole. Bankole, thank you. Just to chip in, because I also operate in this space, even though I'm not moderating today, just very, very briefly, is that as a microfinance bank, okay, there are two ways that you can combat climate change. We've said it: adaptation, mitigation, directly and indirectly. Directly are the following. As the microfinance bank, the first thing you ask yourself is that, what is your source of energy? If it's a dirty fossil fuel energy source, by fossil fuel, that means that you are polluting the environment, whether it is small or big time, you are polluting the environment. So you are thinking about, how do I switch that to renewable energy? Do I do it by going to the market and buying solar panel myself, or do I sign a lease agreement with a solar provider? That's one. The second thing again is this: we ask yourself, if you flooded or no? How many times do I go for meetings with my car? Can I start to use virtual meetings so that I reduce my carbon footprint by driving cars all the time? That's the direct impact. The indirect impact is the kind of customers you're lending to, the sectors. So for example, you're lending to the agricultural sector. Agricultural sector is the most vulnerable sector to climate change because of drought. Rainfall doesn't come as a when due. So how do we now start supporting agricultural business, food production, in ways that even if the climate is not favorable, you're still producing? Greenhouse farming, solar irrigation, solar cultures, all those things are things that you can also do to in engaging in supporting green economy and green solutions. So that's what I would just like to chip in there. So moving to NECA, because
yeah, sorry, can I just say something on what he asked? In addition to that, I think you could have, as part of your strategy, an inclusion strategy, also focusing on your customers that are working with the more vulnerable sector of the pyramid, and then infusing a lot of capacity building there so that you also educate them. So yes, you have your clients and all that, but it's also to educate them and let them understand what the impact is. And then also targeting specific funds that are green, and making that as part of your inclusion strategy to lend. And part of that will also be, there'll be a technical assistance component that will help them change the way they have been transacting prior to now. So that's the customer. So that's also something you can look at as well.
Okay, thank you. Before I go to the question before I allow Kinson to ask this question, there's a chat from Okafor.
Okay.
Website, what can big businesses do to show government that they are, there are a lot of questions from Okafor. So the first one is, what are the low-hanging fruits that governments in the Western Africa can look at to grow awareness among the populace on sustainability and push businesses to do more? So maybe I'll let Bankole speak to that. And I don't know if Emmanuel Tadiwe is in the audience. If he's there, I would like him to also raise up his hand and also chip to that, because he has a lot of experience when it comes to interacting a lot with government. So go ahead, Bankole, before Emmanuel comes in.
Okay, thank you so much. And I think Emmanuel is here. He never misses things like this.
Very good.
I think, first of all, the government really need to create a conducive environment, right? Is to resources. In Western Africa, right, we need to be able to protect and at the same time support SMEs within the green space or in any other space generally. So again, the lowest hanging fruit again is where government can buy trust. Is when they let SMEs understand that, look, there are quite a number of resources for you, and there are also a few other frameworks that protects you from any from other financial mistakes or or issues that can get you out of business. Another one is, right, we can also look at all the different possibilities of trade, intra-trade among West African countries, which still falls down to policies and frameworks. I think from the government side, right, what most government needs to do is just to create and truly accept those frameworks. So we don't want to have that kind of issue whereby the government says, oh, we have reduced the cost of importation of solar products. And then you go to import solar products, and then the guys at the gate of the country tells you that, look, we never heard about that. Where did you get your information from? You have to pay your your complete tax and duty dues. So I think they need to, that level of communication for government again is that when small businesses, particularly in the green or SME sector, have complaints or some form of issues that they need to raise, right, government needs to provide that opportunity for their voices to be heard, and that opportunity also for them to be protected. In this period of week, making, looking for more business and trying to reduce poverty, we see some other Western African governments still demolishing people's businesses. And you're asking yourself, couldn't there be a simple conversation somewhere? Sort of like a door, for us to be able to dialogue and come to a conclusion, right? So I think the first things first is for the government itself to be able to understand that, look, there's a whole new opportunity in this green space, which I think the Nigerian government has understood, and I think the Ghanaian government also have understood that there's a whole new opportunity within this green space, and they are making several efforts to even set up the first platforms, sort of like the NCIC and several other platforms, right, to be able to drive the growth of green opportunities. But that is not complete, because they need to create that policy that supports green. Now, understand that green businesses is not just solar; it cuts across every other sector. For any sector you find in Nigeria, there's a green alternative to it. Every sector, think about it, from energy, fuel, clothing, food, name it, there's a green opportunity to it. So whatever policies that is already currently existing in these sectors, government just needs to be a bit more creative and make it functional in the green space. Thank you.
Thank you. So Emmanuel, as you come in, because as a moderator, what we do is to try and get a lot. I'm like a sponge. I want to try and soak a lot from you guys in a very short period of time, in the best interest of the audience. So Emmanuel, because I know you are the CEO of a center that represents a global center, so please give us that global perspective as you journey down to local, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jubril, Bankole, and Neka. I hope you can hear me very well.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, I thank you very much for inviting me to share a bit of my thoughts around some of the issues being discussed today. First of all, I'd like to say well done. Congratulations to you guys for putting together this conference. The journey to a greener economy or a greener Nigeria is a journey that we all must seriously embark on, because as they say, we don't have a plan B for another planet. As a country, we are exposed to the dangers of climate change, whether it's Lagos you're living in, where you are exposed to the dangers of flooding from the sea encroachment, where Some scientists have said that Lagos is not too far from the fault line of a tsunami, Lagos and Accra in particular. We're all exposed to the dangers of climate change. So, and then all the issues outlined in the SDGs, we're all vulnerable to them, whether it's from poverty to hunger and life below water, life on land, climate change, all of the issues outlined in the SDGs, we're all exposed to them. So as an institution, FC4S Lagos, in line with its other members in the 32 other countries of the network, our focus is to see how we can leverage both private sector and public sector ideas to resolve the problems thrown up by climate change, and the problems also outlined for resolution and for solution by the SDGs. One of the things we've done is that our center has included both government institutions and private sector institutions into this network to enable us come together with credible ideas that would resolve some of the problems that you've identified in your speech or in your contributions. For SMEs in particular, as the engine of growth of any economy, and as the largest employer of labor in any economy, of youths and employable people, there's need for government to deliberately be at the vanguard of supporting the SME sector, not just with policy, but with funding, access to low cost, in fact, zero interest funding where possible, especially at this COVID time, where the same SMEs have been battered by so many challenges and problems. So one of the initiatives we are pushing is to talk with the regulatory institutions to have a pot, and what we call an SME pot of funds that can be accessed, at a low cost, and that must be focused on green projects. So we want to encourage the green SME space. And those are some of the initiatives and ideas, but it can only be possible where stakeholders from both sides of the divide meet, either via fora, conferences like this to discuss the intricacies, or where experts itemize how these SMEs can be supported to go green by supporting them through initiatives, incentives, waivers. For example, if an SME needs to borrow money from a bank, it shouldn't have any problem. Banks should naturally have a way to lend to green. So that is why, for example, we're doing the project called, the Green Target. We want to know whether banks are currently lending to green, whether banks are lending to institutions or projects or initiatives that supports the transition to a low carbon resilient economy. So I'll just stop here and say that I think there's need for more involvement of government in terms of policy initiative and incentive. There's a need for more awareness from our own side as a private sector to get people aware of the possibility of accessing these initiatives. So that's a meeting point, or that forum for us to meet to facilitate that engagement is what NCIC does. It's what FC4S does. It's what professionals like Dr. Jubri do every day. So we need to do a lot more. We are way behind. I'm told that, for example, the SDG economy is about $12 trillion, the opportunity. In Nigeria alone, the sustainable finance opportunity is about $98 billion. But we're just scratching the surface here. There's a lot more that we can do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for that insightful contribution. So I will go to Kingston. Can you please ask your question now, or whether you can unmute him to speak? Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is Kingston Elendo. I'm so glad to be participating in this program today. I really appreciate your individual contributions, especially from Dr. Bankole and the Jubri and the others. Yeah. So my question is in relation to the business case of green economy, especially when Dr. Bankole spoke about trying to use renewable energy, to boost the economic recovery in Nigeria. Now, but the question is, does it actually make economic sense to the poor families in Nigeria, or Nigerian women whom we've been talking about, that we want them to start using renewable energy? Today, we can know what the panel renewable energy panel cost and the maintenance. I was speaking to somebody just yesterday. Somebody told me that, is this sustainability actually cheap? Is it cheaper to use gas, to use electricity generated by the government than to use the solar panel? Because sometimes solar panels get weak after a few years, and the cost of buying the battery, the cost of buying other panel, in fact, everything becomes so expensive. So we want to hear from Dr. Bankole. From the climate center you've been managing, is there something you've done or from your experience that has been able to help some poor countries or people from poor communities in the other countries or in other states, that has helped them to be able to boost the economy using this renewable energy? Is there any case study, any business case, so that we can easily be motivated to practice this?
Bankole, thank you so much, Kingston. Bankole, as you respond, please try and add to it.
Thank you.
Work of,
yes.
Yeah, just try and add to your response the good work that the Rural Education Agency is doing, REA, you know, considering the fact that the question was centered around the low income. Thank you so much, Bankole.
Yeah. So again, so let me just thank you, Kingston. But let me just take it from what Jibril said, right? If you understand the REA, that's Rural Education Agency, you will see that they've done quite a lot of work, you know, to be able to drive energy transition in the low income, you know, generating areas, right? Or low income earners. And also when you talk about people who provide services like this, there's also a Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria. I think it's still being headed by Segun Adaju. And then they've done quite a lot of work to be able to boost either providers or even sellers of solar home system or you know, solar related services. So I think that first of all, right, from an economic perspective, because again, this is a transition, right? It will be very hard for you to see downright corporate governments, you know, corporate businesses just jumping straight into this market and trying to provide it. The first few ones started, but the business model could not correspond because those who initially needed that power more are those at the rural areas. And so if the rural areas, you know, income generation opportunities are not being improved, there is no way they can transfer into their home usage or their lifestyle usage. So what you find the REA different aspects of where people at the low income earning areas are able to generate their businesses from. So from little markets here and there, you're seeing cooperatives coming together and purchasing, you know, renewable energy, you know, products and services for their members, so that they can be, you know, they can be able to scale and pay in installmental rates. So even for the young man that I also, you know, spoke about that does, you know, the clean cooking stove, you know, technology, it's called Power Stove. So what Power Stove is being done now is being headed by OKSA, I think. So what Power Stove is doing also now is that they are creating opportunities whereby they can speak to cooperatives, where these different rural people, you know, connect together. So many of them do Ajo, they do Esusu, they do all these things, right? So they are speaking to these different cooperatives so that they can break down the cost of getting a clean cooking stove, whereby again the continuation of, you know, improving and accessibility of terms of distribution and, you know, and business of those at the low income earning group, you can boost, you know, their transition into renewable energy. And when it comes to the purchase and the, you know, the sales of the PV themselves, earlier I mentioned also that Oxano Solar, supported by Orlon, also has raised some finance to be able to, you know, assemble and manufacture, you know, PVs in Nigeria. So in a short while, again, let's give it a little bit more time, right? The cost of these things are going to start dropping little by little, right? Because again, in some countries, what you find now is that renewable energy, you know, like the president of the International Association of, you know, energy or renewable energy said that this year alone, right, like this is the lowest cost of energy that the world has ever seen, but it's not translating to us in Africa. So again, for us in Africa, the more we continue to improve the accessibility of those who provide this, you know, this service, and look at the different functional, you know, policies and framework that can help to boost their business and incentives, then we can see that reduction in purchase and also payment for. There are quite a number of people out there who are providing services is going to be a bit harder because of access to finance for that category groups of people. So the business model has to be, it has to be thrifty inclined. The same business model has to be, it has to be a contribution-based or a community-based style of, access and also service. So I think there's a huge model, redesigning within that part.
Yeah.
But then RE is doing a lot of work. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So we have one more question from Apote Gumme. So I'm so sorry if I didn't pronounce your name well. I'm so sorry. However, please allow the person to speak, please. Thank you.
I think they dropped off, so we can take Edward's question in the chat.
So Edward asked that, are there any, do we currently have a policy in Nigeria that encourages companies and institutions to encourage sustainability in their practice? However, do you want to respond to that? I know you have experience in this.
Okay, I think it's something that's an evolving policy discussion. Definitely, we can say the banking sector, especially the deposit money banks, have kind of taken the lead in this area with the NSBPs, Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles. But we know that similar work is being discussed or starting to be done in regards to pension administrators who have a huge pool of finance which we can use to fund green growth. There's also some work being done among insurance companies. But for now, I would say the industry that's really trying to drive this is the commercial banking industry, and as well SMEs, microfinance banks are also doing that. Although if you look at what they do, they already kind of serve that bottom of the pyramid segment of the country. So definitely in terms of social sustainability, they're doing a lot by their business model, but they're also trying to adapt principles, and these policies are going to be supported by the Central Bank of Nigeria. So there's some movement there, but definitely at the end of the day, we don't want silos of stories or growth. We want to see scalable impact. So while we have green businesses in Nigeria already operating, there are solar businesses that have been operating in Nigeria for years, but how many Nigerians actually have access to clean energy or renewable energy? And that's really the question. And even beyond just Nigeria, we're looking at, this is not just a Nigeria problem, this is an Africa problem, this is a global problem. And then what is the role of business? What's our role as individuals? What's our role as non-profit leaders in solving this problem? So that would be my contribution, although I'm not a speaker for this session. I think you have one more question or a follow-up question from Paul.
And just to into that is, I know about the Nigerian Stock Exchange and the FMDQ OTC Exchange.
Exactly, yeah.
Principle for listed companies, yeah. Is there another question? I think that's the last one.
Yes, right? I think you have one hand.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. In terms of reducing the carbon footprint, especially in the urban centers of most African cities, I think the transport sector is one area where we can also do a lot of in terms of policy. Recently, Ghana made an attempt to ban the importation of salvage vehicles, old vehicles, and they had to reverse the policy because of public outcry, because people thought they don't have the income levels to afford buying newer vehicles. So what can we do in terms of the trade-off between affordability and also enhancing or reducing carbon footprint in our urban cities? What can we do in our transport sector to make sure that our transport sector is also more sustainable with regards to the kind of cars that we see on our roads?
All right. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for that contribution from Ghana. So this is the last. I would just like Neka to, I like to just learn from you, okay? And I'm very sure the audience as well. So I'll ask you this final question as you close. And that talks about, we've talked about the new economies emerging, very important post-COVID is the delivery economy, right? The green economy, the information technology. I know that for the past about 17, 20 years that EDC have been doing this work. You've been working, yes, with some of them, some of the SMEs operating one or two of the economies, but we have more in the manufacturing industry. How ready is EDC to take the lead and start to nurture and groom the new set of entrepreneurs that are very critical, for all these economies I've mentioned towards a post-COVID sustainable recovery pathway? Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. We're very ready, and in fact, we've actually been doing that all this while. We are working with the MasterCard Foundation on a revisional program that seeks to create 200,000 dignified jobs for youth in Nigeria across the agro-allied, across creative, across digital. And to that extent, we've created a lot of projects and programs around those 3 tracks that they can get without even coming to class. And that's actually what we've been doing the last 7 months with COVID. We've created capacity building for them that they can learn either whether they have data, internet, or they do not have internet with our LMS. And to date, we've created almost 30-something courses. And our plan is to create 100-something courses that can help businesses across those sectors. So across agro-allied, in cassava, across catfish, poultry, and in digital space, the same thing. So a lot of the entrepreneurs that you're talking about fall in the digital space. So we're creating content for them, because what we've seen is that with capacity building, we have a change in their mindset. With capacity building, they're able to understand the need to improve their processes, and with capacity building, they understand the need to run their businesses with integrity and with all the sustainability frameworks so that they're sustainable for the future.
In less than 1 minute, Bankole, what will be your closing remark? Do not ask us for money, because that's all you always ask me for: financing, investments. What other things? Thank you.
So we learned in what we see that is happening within the growth of green economy in Africa and also in Nigeria. And so this is what I think, right? I think that next year, right, for everyone who is trying to look for another additional way of having to push for investment, should start looking at that whole green space, because again, the green space is not from the fossils, market indices and how market, in a mass, right? But we just need to really be strategic about the areas that we want to start with. I think that the low income hanging fruit here from energy could be renewable energy to power things, or other renewable energy for cooking. And there's also the market, the circularity market side of things. And what we're trying to say here also is that SMEs are still the lifeline of this market. The moment we're able to solve many of the gaps that exist within many of these, older, sectors that we find around with green innovation, that will be an exponential, growth and scale in the whole green economy. NCIC, like I said, is really open for anyone who would like to learn more. I have put our email and my email and the website for you there. For those who would like to learn more, please reach out to us for any advisory you might need in how to make this happen. But all in all, I'd like to say thank you for everyone, and I'm also happy that I'm in this panel with Nneka and Jubril. Thank you very much. Okay,
so I think my parting words, Jubril, for entrepreneurs that are listening from all over, would be for COVID has come. It appears it's not going anywhere. Just like you showed with your second slide or your third slide about the waves, there will be other waves that are coming. And any entrepreneur out there that wants to be sustainable needs to have a thorough understanding, not just of their business, but of the industry. They need to learn how to communicate with their stakeholders, so their employees, their customers, and their suppliers. And they need to make sure that they take all the principles of business continuity planning into consideration. That's something a lot of entrepreneurs don't think about. Most people always talk about business model canvas. They talk about the business plan, but your business continuity is important. You need to start looking at risk critically, because there's so many things that are out there that you cannot control, but the minute you start to take them into consideration, you can start to design the mitigants for that. And lastly, to make sure that you keep your finger on the pulse and listen and monitor government responses. We were very excited when we got all the extra funds through NERSL and CBN. But at the same time, they've increased the price of fuel. What that means is transport has increased, and that just adds to the bottom line for those that are manufacturing and using fuel as their base. So, keep your finger out there, your ears on the ground, listen to what the government has, and try, and then, lastly, is to scrutinize your costs. is very, very important. Look at it, scrutinize it, understand your cost structure, drop the things that don't make sense, and focus on the things that make sense.
Thank you so much, Neka and Bankole. So just in closing, and I will talk from the perspective of the investment community. So I must tell you that the investment community is also ready to support this pathway to sustainable recovery post-COVID. And why do I say that? Because I know very well that the African Development Bank, AFDB, we're working very closely with them, alongside Bankole, to see how they can now start to mainstream climate action and sustainable action into the lines of credit that they extend to various commercial banks across Africa, and that is just to position the bank and those commercial banks in Africa in supporting this conversation we're having. And I also know, working with the UN and various ministries across Africa, on how to start to mainstream climate action and sustainable actions, SDGs, into the national budgeting and planning of different African countries. And that then opens up a lot of job opportunities for entrepreneurs, young people, women, even old people that have good ideas along these economies, So those are the kind of things that also happen from that level. And I believe we can do it, as long as the SDG 17 will always emphasize partnership, as long as we collaborate, as long as we're able to blend finance, blend our resources, blend our partnership, blend everything blendable, we blend it. I believe that we're able to deploy this, we're able to achieve this growth and transformation at a very rapid and fast pace. So thank you so much. And the next item on the agenda will be a 5-minute video interlude, just to show you our thoughts around SDGs, impact of SDGs, across Africa. Oliver, over to you. Thank you.
Well, so it will be Jude this time. So Jude.
Jude, over to you.
The United Nations plans to end world poverty by 2030. It's the first of 17 Sustainable Development Goals designed to make the world a fairer, safer, and better place. But have you thought about what that actually means? Poverty is not being able to afford basic things like food, water, healthcare, or a safe home. You may already have some idea what that looks like. But poverty happens everywhere, and it's not the same for everyone. Sometimes it affects entire countries and generations of families. Other people might suffer from situational poverty, where it's caused by a sudden event like an illness or losing a job. Or systemic poverty, caused by inequality or discrimination. The main thing is, poverty can affect anyone, anywhere. And right now, a massive 700 million people live on less than $1.90 a day. Think about the whole world as just 10 people. At least one of those people would have less than $2 a day to live on. Could you do that? So why don't we just print a big pile of money and give it away? Well, it's complicated. One of the reasons that poverty is such a big challenge is because it can have many different causes. Imagine there's a natural disaster in your city. Damage to buildings might mean you wouldn't have a home. If businesses closed down, there would be less jobs. And poor healthcare or sanitation could lead to disease, which can mean choosing between paying for medicine or food. And poverty can cause other problems. Not being able to afford a place to live can lead to discrimination. Without a permanent address, it can be harder to access public services or open a bank account. Poverty even forces some young people to work instead of getting an education. And sometimes it's as simple as no money means no food. You might think there will always be poverty and it's just something we have to live with. But it's actually getting better. Since 1990, 1.1 billion people have moved out of poverty. That's about the same as the population of Europe and the USA combined. Governments have invested in economic growth. Charities have raised money and awareness through campaigns, and individuals have come up with innovative new solutions like drought-resistant crops and inexpensive solar power. So what can you do about poverty right now in your own city?
On
this planet, we want zero hunger by 2030. What does that look like? It means access to nutritious food for everyone, starting with those furthest behind, from birth to childhood, adolescence, motherhood, and old age. And when times are tough or disaster strikes, it means protecting our precious food supplies. But how can this be done? By growing and consuming a variety of crops, investing in family farmers to grow more and better, and in roads and storage to ensure food gets to market, so the 2 billion most vulnerable people can help themselves. At the moment, we waste a third of all the food we produce, which costs our planet precious resources. Overall, hunger and malnutrition cost our economy $3.5 trillion every year, while the cost of creating systems to fix hunger are less than 1/10 of that, $270 billion each year. So it would be crazy not to get this done. We're already on our way. And if we all work together, after 15 years, there will be no more hunger. Zero hunger isn't just a possibility, it's a reality.
The jobs and economy of the future will be urban. By 2030, 60% of the global population will live in cities. To ensure decent work and economic growth, local leaders face many challenges. 40 million jobs need to be created every year for young people entering the labour market. Depending on the developing region, between 45 and 90% of workers are in the informal economy. There are 168 million children in child labour worldwide. Women's average wages are between 4 to 36% less than men's. Many local governments are already taking action, fostering community participation and social dialogue between employers and workers, including in the informal economy, adapting and responding to economic trends and challenges, promoting entrepreneurship, job-oriented policies, innovation and labour protection, and learning from one another through city-to-city cooperation. Local and regional governments do all this to ensure inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all, which is Goal 8 of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Achieving SDG 8 depends on local governments.
Great. Thank you very much, Jude, for taking us through those 3 very important SDGs. And thank you, everyone, for staying with us this far. So we have come to the second half of our very important conversation at the International Sustainability Conference 2020. And I think I've learned a lot. I feel like I've been administrating at the back end, but I've also been learning a lot. So thank you very much to the speakers from our first session and to those who contributed. We're going now into our interactive case session where we'll be discussing food security, eliminating the bottlenecks to achieving zero hunger. So we know that making sure that all people have not just physical access, but economic access to nutritious food is something that cannot be overemphasized. During the COVID-19 lockdowns, we saw the impacts that the current food systems have and how it actually makes it more difficult for people to access nutritious foods. And also we know that from the video that I just played that we have several challenges with the distribution, storage, and reduction of waste when it comes to our food system. So today we have 3 organizations represented here who will be sharing their own stories with us, and also who will be interacting with us in the Q&A to see what solutions work, where should we be going. And today we try to get in the spirit of partnership for SDG 17, we have representation from the private sector, from the development sector, and also multilateral organizations. So today I'll be first of all introducing Roland to speak, but let me just run through our 3 speakers. We have Roland Kaucha, who's the Global Vice President of the Hunger Project. Roland, if you could unmute so that we could just see you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Welcome.
And good meeting all of you. Thank you.
Great. And we also have Ayodeji Balogun, who's a proud alumni of the Lagos Business School. He's the Chief Executive Officer of AFEX Nigeria AFEX Commodities Exchange Limited. Hello, Ayodeji. Can you hear us?
Yes. Hi, Orewa. Great to be here. Yes, I'm a proud alumni. Double one for that matter.
Great. You're welcome. And we also have with us Dr. Fadel Niame, who's the Deputy President, the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, doing a lot of great work we should learn about today. Dr. Fadel, welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Oreva. It's great to be with you. Thank you for having us.
Great, thank you. So the format for this second section is a bit different. We will have a case discussion first. So each of our panelists will be presenting about the topic in relation to their organizations, and then we will have an interactive Q&A. So our first presenter in this case will be Roland. So Roland, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much, Oliver, and thank you, colleagues and all participants to this great conference. Thank you very much for having me here. My name is Roland Kaucha, as introduced, and I'm working as the Global Vice President for Program Strategy for the Hunger Project. Now, we've just watched a great video here, and so I will not take you into statistics on the status of food security or SDG 1 or whatever. I think for the fact that we are discussing this particular topic today on food security, eliminating the bottlenecks in achieving zero hunger, I assume, and I hope it's a fair assumption, that it is an admission in itself from all of us that we are faced with significant bottlenecks when it comes to our journey towards achieving zero hunger. And so I will be speaking to a few points, and I will approach this conversation by starting with a brief overview of the Hunger Project and our work in Africa, and then I'll go into more specific detail about what we have seen as the main threads underlying food system sustainability and effective solutions. And I'm calling you today from Malawi, right here in Africa. Now, first, while our name, the Hunger Project, actually speaks to our mission, which is empowering communities to end their own hunger and poverty by pioneering sustainable grassroots and women-centered strategies. And so the emphasis is sustainable, grassroots, and women-centered strategies, and advocating for their widespread adoption in countries and the world. And we do this by addressing the root causes. And it was mentioned in one of the videos there to say there are root causes of hunger and poverty. And so we do so by addressing root causes in a holistic way. Now, at the heart of the work that we do, there is about mobilization, community mobilization, and local leadership to drive sustainable change. And just to mention that sustainable development is more than energy. It's about working with people so that they can adapt to changes that happen in their circumstances. And we are seeing all those changes, right? We just in the COVID pandemic right now. Climate change, there are so many changes that are happening around people's circumstances. And so really, sustainable development is about working with people so they can have the capacity to adapt to such changes. Now, in the work of the Hunger Project, to mobilize the communities, we emphasize on mindset shift with every community that we work with. And that's the first thread, mindset shift for our partners. For a long time, communities in Africa have been made to believe that they cannot do it. They have to wait for someone to come in and drive the change process. An external partner has to come in and drive the change process, either government or NGO or someone else, or a religious institution, something like that. Now, this is the very first thing that we start with. We have developed tools for mindset change workshops, which we conduct in communities we work in. The purpose is to achieve a shift in our community partners from we can't to a point of we can or I can. And we also emphasize that community partners we work with are not beneficiaries. When we talk of beneficiaries, then we have stepped into a power relationship. Someone has become the key player, the other one is simply a passive recipient of what someone does. And so in our work, community partners we work with are partners who drive the change and development process that we do. Now, this mindset, through my work in international development, I think this mindset, I have not only seen it in the community partners we work with. I have seen it also in international development. Or to be honest with you, we see projects typically driven by goals and needs, which have been developed, for example, which have been developed in Washington or Geneva, and they drive a change process in a certain village in Africa. Now, it is not only in international development, I also see it in business world. Rural communities are seen as sole consumers of the products of some business gurus that sat together and developed those products. Now, in both cases, the capacity of rural people who are very key in the sustainable system process is actually overlooked or not fully exploited. The second thread I would like to speak to is exclusion and gender inequality. Women form the majority of food farmers in Africa, and there's a statistic is written on the wall about that. There's a lot of literature to prove that to all of us. And yet, most programs, including business promotion initiatives, they still bypass women. Most food security initiatives look at women as victims. So there is, when we view women, when we view the socially excluded, we view them as victims and not necessarily as drivers of the solution. So in such a way, when programs are being designed, we design them with the victim in the mind, and the victim is at the end of the pipeline, and they only appear where they are called beneficiaries. 20 women received so many kgs of seed, so and so on. But it's time now to start thinking and moving, also changing our mindset, not to view women as victims, even including in climate change, but to start viewing women as key drivers of the solution itself. Now, the other thread I would like to speak to is Youth Badge, Africa's Youth Badge. It's clear, we've been taught, literature has said it, that it presents itself to us in two sides of the palm. It depends on how we respond. It presents to us risks, which are very huge: insecurity, instability, mass migration, if young people do not have opportunities to improve their lives. Yet, it also presents to us the innovation, leadership, and future workforce potential that we can actually leverage and enrich if we place our investments and target them carefully. And that's very key for business people. Now, how does the Hunger Project do it? The Hunger Project uses what we call the epicenter strategy. The epicenter strategy in Africa is driven by the mindset of community leadership. So when we work in a community, we bring together a community of about 10 to 15,000 people into a cluster of villages to create what we call an epicenter, or a dynamic center where communities are mobilized to act to meet their own basic needs. The idea there is to maximize our reach while supporting rural women, particularly by making sure that services are centralized and well located and within a walkable distance. Now, at the epicenter, we train community leaders, both traditional leaders in the area and people who step forward to volunteer. We actually call them animators because they go out and start animating what they have been trained on, and that creates a multiplier effect. These community leaders are trained in a variety of sector-specific areas, including health, agriculture, water and sanitation, food security, business, and entrepreneurship, and all that we know as a holistic approach to development. Now, over the course of several years, the Hunger Project staff and the epicenter host workshops to train these communities on best practices and support communities' development. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to speak specifically to food security, the animators drive trainings and like I heard about conservation agriculture or smart agriculture, whatever we call it. They go around in their communities and train neighbors about best ways to dry food, not only to produce, but actually to also dry it or keep it, or even how to move it from one point to the other point, so that we reduce post-harvest losses and make proper food utilization. And they also keep community food banks stocked with grain in case there is a disaster. Now, these trainings help to build community leadership, resilience, as well as putting community leaders in the driving seat of development. I know COVID is a hot topic, and as I go towards the close of my my talk today, I mean, I can't avoid but just talk about it. All right. Now, we have seen the importance of these leaders during the time of the crisis, ladies and gentlemen, to be very, very honest, and no one can deny that. Most of NGOs were withdrawing from communities. Most of business people, some of them were shutting down. There were lockdowns and restrictions on travel and all that. Most of us professionals we cut ourselves out from the communities, but something happened. We saw an emerging of community leadership, that those people have nowhere to go. They have one home, one community, one place, and it is where they are placed. They never withdrew. Some NGOs, some business people have had to come up with strategies of re-entry because they knew they exited temporarily. But these community leaders never exited. They stayed there. We saw them managing government response. We saw them managing the way to help people to train and bring awareness. The question we have today, as we go into the post-COVID, or as we go into the recovery stage, or as we go into rebuilding economies, whatever name we give it, the question we have is, are we ready to challenge ourselves and be humble enough and accept that we learned something? What did we learn? How can we leverage leadership that manifested during COVID-19 to help us break the bottlenecks in effective production, storage, distribution, and utilization of our food systems? First, we need to shift our mindset around our rural communities. You know, they are not helpless or solitary consumers of our products or mouths waiting to be fed. Ladies and gentlemen, they can and they must be key players in every supply chain that every entrepreneur puts in place in the communities we work in. I was in Ghana recently, and you know, I saw there in Ghana a wonderful example of a woman called Esther. She used a microfinance loan from the epicenter to purchase a cassava processing machine. She processes cassava inputs from local farmers and creates flour, which she sells to the local school system, which produces food for the children, and then to small provision businesses in the neighboring communities. By localizing the supply chain like this, we reduce a number of barriers, including problems to road network and moments where our supply chain has been cut because of a situation like we face with COVID, and every potential blockages, as well as anything that can be a bottleneck in the rural communities that we work in, and we create a thriving business. Now, I am closing. And so I would like to touch on sustainability initiatives. When rural communities are involved in decision-making process and implementation of sustainable solutions aimed at promoting zero hunger, they have ownership. They are committed to seeing them up to the end. And when community leaders are involved in the design of the initiatives, they are most likely to truly address the root causes of hunger and food security, most of us seated here, educated as we may be, we may not understand those root causes. In conclusion, therefore, when businesses leverage gender-sensitive community-level leadership, it will create systems in the rural communities that are more sustainable and benefit more people. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you very, very, very much for sharing those thoughts. Thank you so much, Roland. And I want to encourage everyone. So please, if you have some thoughts on this, and we're going to come back to the Q&A, please put your questions or your contributions in the Q&A box or in the chat box. So after our presentation by other distinguished speakers, we'll come back. I'm sure people would have a lot of thoughts that communities are not just beneficiaries, they are key players, they are solution providers. And especially I like the fact he acknowledged us women. Women are also the backbone of the economy, not just the SME. So thank you very much, Roland. So now we would have Ayodeji Balogun share his thoughts with us. Let me just get his slides up.
Thank you very much, Oreva. Yes, so it's great to be here, and it's a pleasure sharing thoughts with Dr. Fadel and on the work they do. We as Apex are a private, next slide, Oreva. We're a private sector commodities exchange. We do a lot of work in the agricultural value chain. So food security is a strong part of what we do. On our website, we say we are crazy enough that we think we can help Africa feed itself. So that's like the landing page on our website. And we measure what we do as a business across five SDGs. One, no end poverty, zero hunger, women and gender, responsible consumption, and that's sort of how we track our progress as a business itself, in addition to other measures. What we try to do is to look at the developing world. So take a few, and because by the way, when you get an email from Professor Chris Ogbeche, it always feels like an assignment. So we will still go through some data as we go through this, and then we'll get into a bit more discussion. So we looked at Nigeria as a benchmark with the BRICS, and then added Kenya and Ghana, and South Africa, as some comparables to look at how we're progressing. About 3 years ago, Nigeria took over from India as the poverty capital of the world. At the time, I think we crossed the mark at about 80 million poor people in Nigeria. Over the 3 years, India had actually continued to reduce from 80 million now to 53 million, while we've moved from 80 million to 100 million. So we currently double the population of poor people in China and India. Literally speaking, if you take all the poor people in India and in China and you add them together, you have the number of poor people in Nigeria. But that's not the alarming data. The alarming data is that 1 out of every 2 Nigerians is poor, using the World Bank poverty benchmark. While even in India, when you look at it, it's actually 1 out of 10. It's 1 out of 20 for India and China. So they have 4% of their population living under poverty. So this is really, really, not a good one. And then when you compare with Kenya and Ghana, you see similar trends in terms of population that are poor are actually a lot less, both from an absolute number as well as the percentage of GDP. Next slide. So we looked at, again, the Human Development Index, which is a bit more robust in terms of looking at how does it feel to be in Nigeria? And Nigeria ranks 158 out of 189 countries, way behind the entire BRICS, but also Kenya and Ghana. And if you look at it as well and say, how will this trend continue over the future? So our per capita income today is the same thing as Ghana. But then if you look at inflation at about 14-15% now, and then you look at the trend of risk of further devaluation, then it's likely that even our per capita income would go below that of Ghana in a few months or a few quarters to come. Ghana has an inflation rate. And the essence of inflation, so if you look at it, if you have a double-digit inflation, it's almost impossible for wealth to be grown at double digits, especially in an economy today where we have the economy is going into a recession, inflation is at its peak, and then yields of savings is at its record low. So we have savings at below 1% for almost all short-term instruments. So it's difficult to grow wealth. So we really are burning wealth as a country, and we're growing at 3%. So a lot more people to feed every year. Next slide. Again, just to look at the trend. So because snapshots may not tell the whole story. So if you look at how we've done, seemingly over the last decade and compare that with other countries, it's interesting to look at the trend within Nigeria and Ghana. So in 2011, we had, so if you look at Nigeria was 7.6%. People were undernourished. Today, we've doubled that percent, so we're at 12.6% today. So a lot more people have gone undernourished over the last decade. And if you compare that with a number like Ghana, you see that it's slightly reduced. Not significantly reduced, but it's slightly reduced. And everybody else in the world. So you look at the whole of Africa, which is the blue line, sub-Saharan Africa, you see that Nigeria up until 2016-17 was below the African average, but it seems that now we're even tilting the average higher, and we've exceeded the average. So, and these are issues that, and when we think of yes, food security, but then it's difficult to, we see poverty as well as sustainable consumption as brothers and sisters to food security. The more people you have poor people you have in the country, and the more you do have, the more you are more susceptible to food insecurity. And then if you look at it again, that the drivers are inflation, GDP growth, and other things. Also, inequality is one major factor that we have. Next slide, River. So, and then when we look at it from the angle of sustainable, responsible consumption and industrial. So again, this comes to two angles that I like to look at this. One is what is the quality of food we consume when we, particularly around the nutritional factor, either by consuming it directly from the farms in almost raw food that are then cooked, or in terms of what the quality of industries happen. So one of the policies we've had in the last 2 decades that really was strong around, some of the policies were around, addition of ensuring that, salt carries iodine, all sugar carry vitamin A. And these are things that you wouldn't do about. So even if you don't have money to buy anything, if you have sugar in your pap, you have vitamin A. So there's some of these kind of policies that we need to look at it. Number one, government needs to push it so that it's widespread. But also corporates need to start to think about it and say, how can I do more good, and what's the incremental cost to me? And how am I sure that I continue to have a generation that is worthy to be fed and worthy to be served as a customer? But the other part is also to look at it even from the supply chain side and say, how much waste, how much of what we produce do we consume, and how much of that do we actually waste? In the whole value chain. It is sad to say that we waste about $10 billion worth of food just between the farm gates and the table. And interestingly, if you look at the percentage value lost in Africa, so in the developed world, OECD, you find that they lose about 12% after the plate. So they consume just half of what they have on the table, and then they throw the remaining to waste. But for us, we actually lose it right from the farm gates due to very fragmented production, low industrialization, infrastructure low environments where we produce this food. And this things that are macro in nature and issues. It's not things that to fix or the certain business. So we at Apex, for instance, we provide storage as a service to 110,000 farmers, and then we train them on a lot about agronomy. And this looks at, so if you look at the entire agriculture from the way we look at it and look at the whole food supply chain, starting from production, when we look at it from a sense of responsible consumption, so poor infrastructure, inefficient supply chains are critical things that we really need to, fix to be able to then start to have. And while some governments will eventually solve some of these, corporates in terms of need to look at themselves and say, how sustainable is our supply chain? How integrated is our supply chain? How do we provide value to our external perimeter of doing business? And COVID has been one of those things that has really reawakened a number of corporates, but also called question to others that haven't really looked at their extended perimeter of doing business to say, hey, what if the world goes into standstill for 3 quarters? Will you continue to produce? And that will be a function of, do you know the person that produced for the person that produced for you? And if you can't go 2 steps backwards, are good for you. So next slide. We look at agriculture, and when we look at it, just like I said, we always look at it from a point of agriculture. And so this slide sort of lays out the way we try to dissect agriculture and the services that we provide. So the first part is, what's the quality of what is being produced? How do you manage things around aflatoxins that then start to stunt growth? How do you ensure that we, per hectare of land, the quality of food or the quantity of food produced is actually more? So every time you need to increase production, you're not expanding the land. And this is a lot of, so we do, and Agra is actually a partner that we work with as Apex in terms of ensuring that our farmers are financially included as a commercial player. They can access loans, they can access improved seeds and fertilizer, and then the training to produce. Their yields are a lot higher on the same farmland. And in 2 to 3 years, we've seen on the average income growth at between 200 to 300%. And this is moving people from about 1,200 per annum household income to $3,500, $3,000, $4,000 household income per annum, which is quite significant. When we look at, so the other part of it is then to say, what's irrigation as a shared service, and what are the potentials around a dual season cultivation for the year? How do you provide storage as a service? So we have warehouses across about 60 warehouses across Nigeria now that serve over 600 communities of farmers. And then they can bring in 2 bags into the warehouse, pay about 50 naira per bag to store per month for 3 months. And so it's really broken down into very simple basics and accessible to them. And the last part is that where the farmer loses the value the most is around trade. And what does it get? What is the fair share of value when it trades, and how is that whole system disintermediated? And then what are the roles that job opportunities and wealth creation opportunities that can come up around there? And these are some of the things that we do as Apex, and then we also work with a lot of corporates next slide. Just keep the next one and move to the last one. Next slide. So, it was said earlier in the discussion, one backwards. Earlier in the discussion that the SDG economy is a $12 trillion economy. But when you look at the development space, the entire value of capital available, development capital available, is about 600 billion, which is a couple-year data. So the size of the problem is 20 times the available capital if the development capital is only supposed to solve this problem. So we need to find structures that can unlock capital from the private capital to support these goals. And this is why it's really important for corporates to really embrace and support the SDGs and provide their own commercial capital to address some of these problems. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Ayodeji. It was a lot to pack, but I think you did a very good job packing it into the time available. And I like the fact that we've gone from looking at global issue and the usual approach to now looking at what are innovative organizations and enterprises, even in Africa and in Nigeria, like IFEX, doing, and what should businesses who are still part of society and who these issues affect, what should they be thinking about? Because even beyond just their supply chains, their employees live in these environments. You have to exist in this society. So if the society is hungry, what does that mean for your business? Thank you very much, Ayodeji. So at this point, I'll welcome Dr. Fadel Ndiame to share his thoughts. I'll put up your slides now. So Prof, we also have 15 minutes for you.
Thank you so much, Oteva. I think, firstly, I would like to thank you for inviting my organization, AGRA, Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. And I'm really very pleased to share this platform with my good friend Ayodeji and to share the passion of Roland's. I think it's quite exciting to see how this discussion is taking us to the core of issues. Now, because of time limitation, as I introduce myself, I'm the Deputy President of AGRA. And if you go to the next slide, I will basically tell you the gist of my story in 2 minutes. Then I'll go into the detail in 5 minutes. And I will come back and tell you what I just told you in 2 minutes. So that's what I'm trying to do. Now, because we're dealing with a very complex problem, I think the safest point to start from me is to say AGRA was actually set up to address exactly the issue of hunger and poverty. And this slide gives you a very high-level view of where we started from. Some of you will remember that the original mandate of AGRA was set up by late Kofi Annan, who also set up was behind the whole SDG process. And I think there was a concern we need to be aware of is Africa as a continent was not doing well. In fact, if you comparatively to the other continent, what we used to call the first green revolution did not succeed in Africa. And the reason was the continent was very diverse and much bigger than other continents. Therefore, it was not possible to have a blueprint. You could not just have a solution applied across the board. You required an ecosystem building, which entailed working with government, private sector, and farmer to build a delivery system that would unlock value for our smallholder farmers. Now, one of the challenges linked to that, and that's at the core of what AGRA was set out to do, you can go to the next slide, is smallholder farmer by definition are a very bad value proposition. If I use the language of the first panel, they are small, they are undercapitalized, and they are scattered all over the place, which means the transaction cost of delivering anything to smallholder farm is much higher than anybody else. Therefore, and I'm glad, excuse me, the presentation that my friend Ayodeji just did is a good illustration of what is required. But very quickly, these are the countries where AGRA operates in. We are in 14 countries across Africa, but we also operate with other continents, Brazil, Africa, China, as part of our mandate really to catalyze a uniquely African transformation. Now, over the last 10 years, we had a chance to really operate and come up, next slide, Oliver, to come up with specific element of the solution that is required. You can move to the next slide. It was important to come up with specific technologies that will respond to the agroecologies of the continent. I think you can move to the next slide, Orteva. It was also possible to build a delivery system through agro dealership and seed company that will enable to link our producers to the market. But at the same time, the conducive policies that are required for an ag transformation to take place have also been built. So the first 10 years, we had all the elements of the answers, but we have a big challenge. And I think my friend Roland alluded to earlier, you cannot solve Africa's structural challenges through projects or fragmented intervention. You needed a consolidated systemic approach that enable you to drive impact at scale. This required a new approach. It required an approach to partnership. My slide is not moving, but I hope you are bearing with me. Exactly. So this gives you a sense of what was done in the first 10 years. Varieties, delivery system, policies, including innovative financing solution. I'm happy to say that the current president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Adesina, was then as vice president at AGRA, and the whole Mirsal experiment was actually incubated within AGRA. So good work has been done, but move forward. The challenge we have now is you can't continue just to do projects. You need to think about a systemic approach that will address issue at the farm, at the system, and at the national level. And this is exactly what we are dealing with. You can move to the next slide. It is therefore for us to address issue that the reducing hunger and poverty will hinge on our ability to drive inclusive agricultural transformation. And this is basically how, as an organization, with our partner, that we intend to contribute to the SDG goals. You can move to the next slide. We also know, and I think COVID, I mean, there have been many mentions to COVID, and I really love the last slide of Dr. Jibril in the first session. COVID is actually reversing all the gains that have been made, potentially. And it's not the only pandemic. I think we are focused on COVID, but the bigger problem, as was discussed earlier, has to do, and you can go to the next slide, climate change and the economic. Next, again, this is another element of the conjunct, exactly here. A number of pandemics that are all combining their effect to bring down the opportunities of smallholder farmers. You can't deal, as some people say, you can't stop the sea with your arms. You can't deal with all these challenges with isolated intervention. It requires a complete revision on our approach to ag transformation. Move next. And what success looks like is building the capacity of smallholder farmer, SME, and government to be more resilient and adaptive. And these are the three areas that I will not have time to go through it: absorptive capacity, adaptive capacity, and transformative capacity. The first one will help everybody to minimize exposure to shock through preventive measures. Some of them have been highlighted earlier. The second category requires proactive and informed choices based on our understanding of the pattern of this pandemic. And the third category has to do with the policy and institutional intervention. We go back to this important idea of public-private partnership. Now, how does AGRA implement that across the continent? Next slide. Maybe you can move even to the next one, and I'll come back to that. Firstly, at the core of everything we do, and I think we share it with all of you, is the principle of inclusivity. I will not come back to it because Roland's have been extremely brilliant in articulating it. Issue of environmental sustainability, we speak to the issue of the first panel. All of this leading to building resilience, but in a context of economic viability. Because as you know, and this is exactly the challenge, if you are not creating wealth, you can't be winning over hunger and poverty. But all of this should happen in a complex of partnership that requires mutual accountability, especially between the public and the private sector. I will give you some example of this. Next slide. Using our portfolio in Nigeria, the basic value proposition is you need to build a functional system. If I go back to the smallholder farmers, you have to have in mind that you cannot deliver service deliver impact at scale if you don't connect several subsystems from seeds, fertilizer, extension, agro dealership, markets, and inclusive finance. This requires a significant orchestration by government. Government being the bigger player, it set the tone of the conversation. And I totally, fully agree with the conclusion of the first panelist. The panel is the SME is going to be the crucial player in this whole game. Next slide. How, in summary, these are the three buckets of intervention that we use across the continent. Work with government and build government capacity, not only to set the scene, to plan, but also to execute and coordinate itself across different layers of government. Coordinate with private sector, coordinate with development partners. But the second pillar is probably the most important in this conversation is how do you build a delivery system that are effective, that are sustainable, and that are impactful. And as you can imagine, it's through SMEs. Third pillar is you need partnership across the board. And I want to illustrate it very quickly in our portfolio in Nigeria. You can move to the next slide. Nigeria, now, obviously, because of the three pillar, there is a sequencing. Because the government defined the terms of the conversation and the rule of the game, you have to start with government own readiness to drive a private sector-led, smallholder focused, SME-based, women-centered transformation. Therefore, the institutional arrangement and the policy by government and the investment will enable private sector investment that lead to empowerment of smallholder farmer and consumers. So it has to be, there is a sequence, there is an orchestration that has to be deliberate and intentional. Next slide. Now, I will not go too much into the detail. You can look at it. In Nigeria, because of Nigeria is such an important country on the continent, we focus on two states, Kaduna and Niger State. But in this work, we're able actually to engage in all the layers of government, from federal government and the way it's interactive with the local government and the provincial government in building system. And I think what AFEX is doing will be here a specific example of how partnership have been built in Nigeria. The next slide will give you an overview of the portfolio, just to give you an idea across the two states. And you see all the investment in the order of $10 million from 2017 to now. This is basically seed money to leverage maybe 100 or 200 times the amount that is required. And I'll give you an example in which an investment of $1 million across consortia has led to $500 million of investment by private sector and donor. You can move to the next slide. This is the example of the Kaduna consortia, where the gist of this program exactly is to build a platform of players. It's a whole value chain intervention, and you'll recognize the role that AFEX played here. But the logic of this is for you to unlock value for the most vulnerable, you need to find a way to forward link into more lucrative segment of the value chain. You need to be driven by the demand by consumers, have processors and market players linked to the SME who service smallholder farm. That's the basic logic of building. It's a market discovery infrastructure building that deal with the issue of effective delivery, but also sustainability. If you look at the detail, and you can see it in the gray in the middle, the total investment that we have made was about 1.7 million. You can see here how much the SME themselves have invested and how much all the development partners have contributed. On the right-hand side, you can see the metrics, the impact at farm level, at SME level, but also at local government. Because we shouldn't take it for granted that government has all the capabilities and the resources to do their role, to coordinate themselves and create the enabling environment. I think this is what has been done in Nigeria and is being done across the continent. Move to the next slide. What is emerging here, because beyond the project, basically what I'm saying is we do project, we do innovation hubs, labs, we support platform. But at the end of the day, what is at stake is, can we come up with new way of doing business that can achieve the triple bottom line that Dr. Benoke, I think, was referring to earlier. One of the things that proved to be very important in the work we did in Nigeria, of course, is the possibility of building what we call the consortium, where you have SME-led platform that bring together public and private investment to create wealth. It's a risk-sharing facility, to use a simple language. But to put it together require a very, very detailed and sophisticated approach to build trust and make sure that the partners can work together. Across the continent, this is happening. We have example in Ghana, Nigeria affects. I think the presentation made earlier is very clear. I'll not go back to it. But the point here is we are working together to generate a delivery model that make SME the key market connector through which you can unlock value and create wealth for everybody. Next slide. As part of that, obviously, digital is going to be very important, especially given what we spoke about in terms of managing transaction costs. The need to collect data, real-time data, and to enhance efficiency. I think we understand the power of digital, both for financial services, to manage insurance, but also for extension, because new model of extension are emerging out of the technological revolution that we are experiencing now. You can move to the next slide. This work is not only happening at the country level, we are also doing similar work with the regional economic communities across the continent. And all of this is basically grounded on a linkage between SME, farmers, and consumers with government support. And the point here is, through this approach, move to the next slide, please, we are able to contribute to help countries meet their own requirement from the CADEP and Malabo Declaration, where there is a commitment for public investment to create the condition for increased productivity, enhance resilience, and work through local private sector. And I'm now concluding. You can move to the next slide. So it can be done. That's the basic message. It's a big problem. It can be done, but it requires cooperation, in which, and the key element that we found across the board is technology is crucial. You need to have the right technology across the board. And I appreciate all the reference to the service delivery on mechanization. Everything you can drive on technology is possible. Secondly, you'll need a strong private sector, especially the SME, and enable them to be able to invest and take advantage of the huge opportunity of a growing market. Public sector investment and leadership is crucial. Without a vision and a commitment at the highest level of government, this will not happen. All of this depend on very, very clear accountability mechanism. And finally, and the next one will be my last slide. As an organization working with all the partners, this is the key offering that we are able to make to drive the performance of this continent to meeting the SDG challenges. Firstly, being able to deliver technology at scale. Secondly, finding ways of working with partners and making sure that there is a return on their investment. Thirdly, using all the platform that we have to do advocacy and showcase the good model. Since we are in Nigeria, I have to send my greeting to my good friend from Babangona. I mean, I'm sure you know him. Kola. It's one of the amazing experience, a good model, innovative approach of how to unlock value for smallholder farmer, but using a business-driven solution, mutual accountability, but also promoting regional food trade. I think this is how, as a continent, we can unlock this possibility. What I promise you in 1 minute is to tell you that as an organization, we're set up exactly to address the issue of reducing hunger and poverty. We have had a track record of working with all of you to build model. The challenge now is we have to take them to scale. and do it in a context where you have significant challenges with the environment, and the main one being climate change, that require that we focus particularly on the most vulnerable, women and youth. The solution exists, but they have to be built around the need to score on all the metrics: inclusivity, healthy diet, sustainability, job for youth. SME are the way to go, but you need collaboration with government and commitment in the long haul. I thank you for your attention.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Fadel. I know that was a lot to pack into the time that we have, but I think you did an amazing job. And thank you very much, Adeodeji and Roland. So my people, you have your electronic clap. You can give a round of applause to all our speakers for sharing with us very real solutions, very real actions, what's being done. And I think at the end of the day, what we all said is we have solutions, we have models that are being tested or that have shown promise. And we can still see that even when it comes to solving the problem of food systems, to get nutritional, affordable foods to Africans and to everywhere else in the world where it's needed, we need to create systems and we need SMEs. It cannot be an intervention or project by project based way or approach. But at the end of the day, we also have, I think we've been trying to do this now for decades in Africa in particular. And now we see the rest of the world moving into, more climate resilient farming solutions. So for a case, for example, a way that we're not doing that in Nigeria, for example, is that we had very unusual rain patterns this year. And so farmers were badly hit because their normal schedules have been seriously disrupted. So I would like each of you to share your thoughts on what the last wave in Dr. Jibril's slide, what it means for this food system, because we're still trying to build a system really. And now we have the challenges of climate change, of changing weather patterns, of still depending on rain-fed agriculture. So even if we create solutions for an innovative woman in a village, the weather can still affect her productivity and what the impact she can have at the end of the day. And even if we have some SMEs doing work in here and there, we need to scale up those solutions. So I'll start with Roland. What are your thoughts in terms of climate resilience for these food systems that we're already trying to build?
Thank you very much, Oriva, and thank you, colleagues. So yes, the climate problem is here, it is with us. And I think one first admission is it's beyond climate, it's beyond environment. It touches on the economy, it touches on health, it touches, it's on anything. So and the window, as we know, is closing very fast and we have to act now. And I'll go back to inequality, which is a key thing because it is one of the main drivers of climate change, okay? Even in the way we respond and the way, like, how badly hit you are with climate change, we see those differences also on those that are better to do and those that are not well to do. And when you analyze further, even in those that are not well to do, that are badly hit, women in there and the socially excluded are heavily hit. So I think what we have to do at this stage is to make sure that leadership in those change processes, adaptation processes, the way that we build the resilience of the communities, the central leadership of those processes are owned and driven by those that are affected most, so that in such a way, they can be sustained even when we are not there. I think that's how I would frame it. And there are many different ways of doing that, making sure that, okay, to what extent do we make sure there is a big base of shock, of adapting to shock and all that. So those are specifics. But as long as we do not have those that are directly affected, and in this case, mainly women and girls as main drivers of adaptation processes or taking leadership in the way we respond to climate change, then we will have continued problems because they will still be at the receiving end of the, at the end of the pipeline.
Great. Thank you very much for that. JG, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, three things when we look at climate and food security. So the first is we need to really focus a bit on science and improve the quality of our genetics, our genetic material, and the routes from the lab to the market is just not where we need it to be across the continent. The second very important part in terms of how farmers can deal with this is around assurance. And then there's been a lot of progress along Africa. Agra has been a really driver of change in insurance in Nigeria and in other parts of Africa. But then there is that part of it that the cost is just, burdensome. So the average cost of insuring farms in Africa is about 5%. And then if you look at other developing worlds that are a lot more disaster prone, the maximum you get is about 2%. Indonesia, Malaysia, you have insured about 2%. So it's still quite prohibitive in terms of the cash outlay to a lot of farmers. Mm-hmm. And the climate-based our solutions are quite few, but then the variety is increasing quite fast. So that's the second part. The third part, when you look at the climate change, is about how do you increase the number of times you produce. So there is a very important quote that I once heard, in my years in agriculture, that says that a farmer needs water, not rain. It's like the farmer needs rain to plant. No, he needs water wherever the water comes from. And this is just something that can be really simple to solve. But then, the last time we had an irrigation project in Nigeria was built by Shagari. So it tells, I wasn't even born. It tells how bad our situation is. So these are three things I think we need to really look at the micro and at the macro level.
Great, thank you, DG, and thank you everyone for posting your questions in the Q&A. We're coming to them. Dr. Ndiame, if you could share your thoughts, and I know Agra is this part of your framework because we saw environmental sustainability there. So how are you helping our public sector and also the smallholder farmers in this regard?
No, thanks. I think my colleagues have articulated most of it. Just to put it in a very systematic way, because you can't manage something you don't understand. So at least you have three types of capability. Firstly, you need to be able to adapt when it happens. I mean, we all know that we were all caught napping with COVID, and in terms of readiness, it's amazing. Small, big countries, we're all surprised. So the first thing is when it happens, increase your ability to adapt, to absorb the shock. And concretely, I think my friend Ayodeji mentioned insurance is one of them. I mean, you should be able to, if you can't harvest, you should be able to get a payment that allows you to feed your family. But also having soil maps, because in cases like that, you need to be very precise on what to do, what resources can you use in order to deal with a shock like this. I mean, in West Africa, as you can see, I'm from Senegal, and since I was born, we have been having drought. I mean, that was a long time ago. So we can say that our people don't know what drought is. Over the years, they have learned how to identify varieties that are fast maturing, and that would really be producing within the shorter rainy season. The problem is if you are hit with several pandemics at the same time, COVID, drought, and others, it becomes more complicated. But as part of this absorptive capacity, also using the principle of agroecology, making sure that we are able to harvest water and keep it, to manage the soil moisture, so that when you plant, you optimize the chances of all the environmental principles that rest on the interaction between different natural processes. But all of this is knowledge intensive. So in a sense, people, especially to go back to what Roland was saying, not everybody have the same endowment. And typically the people who are marginalized, who are less endowed will be more exposed. So you need to have specific way of supporting them through different means, that government typically would have at their disposal. So that's basically around absorptive capacity. But the most important one is to be a bit more proactive. We know now that The question is not whether you'll have another pandemic, it's just when. What should we be doing now? Clearly is start breeding for those drought-tolerant and early maturing variety, as mentioned. So you can align the pipeline of the research system, making sure that we are using more water-efficient technologies to minimize your losses, to diversify your crops, and for our country to have strategic grain reserves. Sometimes you see our production, going to waste. And this is where some government, most of our government will mop it up and put it in reserve so that in case we have a crisis, you have a basis to distribute. Very few countries have grain reserve that will feed the country for 3 months. We actually were very lucky that we had a good rainy season during this COVID period. Otherwise, it would have been a complete disaster. So we can do something about it. We cannot say we didn't know. But more importantly, to use it as a transformative. I think there is a transformative capacity of coming up with new business models that are digitally based, making sure that, there is a lot of utilization of drone, being able to do predictive analytics to anticipate, creating policy that enable early generation seed. So there are a number of measures that can be done, diversifying, creating rural employment away from farming, etc., etc. So there is no one fix, but it goes back to what, again, Roland was saying, it's a self-drive mindset. We all have agency. We have an ability to absorb information, process it, and plan for next year in case things don't go well. But it requires the same spirit of collaboration between the public and the private sector. So that's what I can say very shortly around that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, very insightful. And I think clear lines of action for whoever is in that space, and even for those of us who are citizens, because we still have a duty to share the solution. So call your House of Rep member, talk to your senator to get the solutions actually implemented. I'm going to take Keleshi's question. Keleshi, I think some of your questions have been addressed while the speakers were presenting and were speaking, but I'm going to take one of the questions in the paragraph, which says, with the current inflation and the heavy dependence on importation, what are some of the quick measures that can be taken to tackle these challenges? And I think I want to direct this question to Ayodiji, because he's definitely grappling with those issues, working in the finance space and also very actively in Nigeria, which is still very heavily dependent on importation. Ayodiji.
Yeah, there are two tools we have, three tools, two intermediate. So one is to store food, national or strategic food stores, like Dr. Fadel mentioned. Second is to increase our production to 2 cycles per year, so that we produce in the dry and the maize. We currently do that for rice. We need to extend into multiple crops. The third we have is to increase yield, but that's been a struggle for quite a lot of time. So I think 2-cycle farming and a strategic reserve are the 2 quick wins we have.
Great, thank you. And we have a contribution and a question from Mr. Larry Umuna, who's the West Africa Director for TechnoServe. Thank you very much, Mr. Larry. He says, excellent presentation, my good friends. I'll move to your question now. He said, could you please speak to the issue of youth development and how it can be aligned with the new normal of digitization, job creation, food security? What are the 2 most important things we must do in Africa to create sustainable youth involvement in food security? I would like Roland to speak to this, but I wanted to add something to that. So I think at the end of the day, what we want to see is food system businesses. I won't just call them agribusinesses, food system businesses that become the flutterwaves or the paystacks of the near future, not tomorrow, so that we know that youths at the end of the day are growing the food, they're feeding themselves, and they're building these systems that Dr. Fadel mentioned. So, Roland, I know the Hunger Project working across the globe. Are there some lessons you can share with us? And then we'll come back to Ayodiji and Fadel to share their thoughts on that. So, youths getting into the system, how do we do that?
Thank you very much. Yes, so we have a pilot project. Sorry to use the word pilot, because I know people have said, oh, today you call it pilot, tomorrow scale up, and then you keep changing the names and all that. But we have a pilot project going on in Malawi on incentivizing agriculture to make sure that the young people are becoming active players in the value chain. And some of the issues that are coming up in that process is that the issue of, so the young people are so attracted to technology, and how do you leverage that so that technology becomes a key player in the agriculture value chain, but at the same time, it becomes actually a business or a way of making money for the young people. So it's not just being involved. So we have seen sometimes we have looked at the young people as, oh, they should just go to the garden and start planting maize and all that. It's completely different from the way they view it. And even the type of value of crops they want to be involved in, where in the value chain they want to play their role. It has become clear that for some of them, it's clearly not in the place where they are taking a hold to actually cultivate, but in the place where they are involved in the market linkage and saying, okay, this is what is produced in corner B of the country, but it is required in corner X of the country, and playing that role. So understanding how to leverage technology, at the same time, understanding how to incentivize agriculture, okay, so that it becomes attractive for youth or young people participation. That's how one of the ways we are going to make sure that we leverage the leadership of the young people in the agriculture value chain. And we have a pilot like that one currently going on in Malawi.
Great. So so the Hunger Project has a pilot. We wish them great impact with that. So please share us. Please subscribe to the center's newsletter. We share such solutions so we can all learn from that. Thank you. So Dr. Fadel, could you share your thoughts on youth involvement? Because we're saying, oh, Africa's they have the workforce of the future, but are they ready to provide these food system solutions?
Yeah, I think I like the response that Roland's provided, but I think we also see that any crisis is an opportunity to reset and do things differently. I think the issue of youth employment, gender equality, sustainability, and healthy diet, kind of new imperative that set the way business should be done. I think let's try. There are some serious challenges of youth accessing productive resources. I mean, it talks to the policy around land tenure, access to equipment, being part of SME, the whole issue around financing we spoke about earlier. But ultimately, the solution will be part of unlocking value for the chain. I'll give a specific example. In the past, we used to have all this mechanization project by which government imports tractors that are run by public sector. You all have seen the cemetery of tractors all over the place because they are not run properly, they are not maintained, and eventually, they get just disposed of there. New business models are emerging around delivery of mechanization services, which mean people get together, set up a business, acquire a few tractors, and start. You don't need as a farmer to own a tractor if you have just few, 1 or 2 hectares. But you can rent the services. So that's an example of a niche that can be built, structured, set together, and create employment opportunity. The same, so you have significant number of opportunities around. One of the things that AGRA is in one of the delivery platform we're investing on in Nigeria and across the board is what we call the village-based advisor, which are people who are farmers themselves in the village, who are more entrepreneurial, who then become the vector of sharing information. It's very similar to what you're doing, Roland, in what you described earlier. But it can be designed in such a way that young people who have been trained and skilled have an opportunity to deliver service to other farmers and in the process acquire resources for themselves. So I think it's an important issue, but we need to tackle it in a very creative and realistic way. My last point is you need policies that enable it, but we also need to skill the youth. When I hear this idea that, okay, young people are in a hurry, they want cash, but they don't have the skill. You need to acquire it. I think you have a lot of incubation center, many programs like your pilot, Roland's. I think we need to take advantage of all the opportunity for South-South technical cooperation. As AGRA, we are facilitating exchanges between Brazil, China, and Africa around some specific program that enable us to to empower the youth and give them opportunity to play a role in the growing value chain, especially around the SME sector. But I think we have many programs in Nigeria, I know many programs. Again, we need to go beyond the pilot and create institutional mechanisms that enable us to do it at scale and make it part of the agribusiness ecosystem that will drive the transformation of this continent.
Thank you very much. So definitely we're hearing thoughts that this has to be systemic. It can't just be pilot projects with a few youths because we have millions and millions of them. Thank you very much. Ayodeji, would you want to share your thoughts on this? Then we'll take Dr. Ijomawagu's question and Najim's question before we end. Let's see if Ayodeji is still on. Okay, I'm sure he will join us back. So now, Najim, I'll come to your question because I'll take it last. So next question we have is from Dr. Ijomawagu, what are the prospects of scaling up the innovative approach SMEs are using to address the hunger and poverty, considering the systemic nature of the challenges facing Africa? So fiscal, governance, and infrastructure, as we've all pointed out. And I would like us to answer these questions in light of the new development or what's going to be the new normal from January 1, which is the Africa Free Trade Area. This has serious impacts for our food systems, and I'm not sure that at all levels, public sector, private sector, and at all levels of government, even the citizens understand what this means for their systems, because we may not have enough food, but there's a chance that with the new agreement, food may even be going to places where it's more profitable and not necessarily where it's needed. So scaling and how we can help the SMEs to scale. Dr. Fadel, you can continue your thoughts on that.
Thank you for bringing out the issue of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. I think it's a big deal. It's a huge opportunity for basically matching surplus capacity and production to needs, but all of this is mediated through the market. And again, the market can be guided by the regulation. I mean, as you know, we are in ECOWAS sitting in. Basically, you are supposed to have a free movement of goods and people in this region, which means the excess production of Nigeria can find its way in Burkina Faso, rice from Mali, etc. And it's already happening. I think it can be done in a more structured and deliberate way to make sure that as a continent and as a region, we'll be better off. So a significant amount of work is happening. We all know that as we speak now, 30 countries have actually made their own, signatory and deposited their agreement at the, Office of the African Union Chairperson. Now we need to, the devil is in the detail around how do you reconcile the different trade regime? How do you reconcile the standard? How do you, the common protection rate? I mean, we have a whole experience in West Africa. But I think what we need to salute and applaud is there is a significant goodwill, political will, and I think there is a huge opportunity for this continent through economies of scale, free movement of technologies, and everybody in the long will win. But I think we need to have deliberate solution to support the weakest countries or the weakest sector, which might not benefit in the short term. But overall, I think it's an amazing opportunity. One thing I want to add to this as part of that, I'm linking to the issue of youth, is data and analytics become crucial. I think we need to understand what the markets are. What are the regional supply chain? As we speak now, I'm very happy to report that ECOWAS is working on this rise of offensiverie, as they say in French, which will basically create a huge market for more than 12 African countries. And under those conditions, we are more likely to be competitive against rice coming from Indochina, because you have the production capacity. If we can manage the quality and optimize the different water regime that you have across this region, it is possible. But again, the challenge is you have to be organized, coordinated. It goes back to building a system, a delivery system in which everybody wins. It requires significant commitment from countries, but also from the and the regional economic communities to provide space for African private sector in collaboration with the bigger fear is African private sector might not take advantage of it because capital will flow from anywhere, and we have to be very deliberate to make sure that the conditions to support our SMEs are met to make this a win for our SME and also for the youth. But it's a great prospect. It's probably one of the greatest development of our generation, if I can say.
Yes. So thank you. So great opportunity, but we have to be ready. We have to be prepared to take advantage of it so that we don't complain 10 years later. Roland, I would like your thoughts on this. So you operate, you've seen how you operate, the Hunger Project operates in different countries and different regions across the world. So you know what this means. Could you share your thoughts? And okay, Ayodele is back and we'll have his thought after you.
Thank you. So I'll take it from a philosophical point of view. I think Dr. Fadeo has just named it. And so I'll take it from a philosophical point of view. When you open up, when you have a great tree and the tree has got, a mango tree has got beautiful mangoes ripe in there, and you open up to say, okay, everybody go catch your mango and eat as many as you can. And the others are very short to reach the mangoes, the others are very tall and all that. You have to be very careful when you blow the whistle of saying go. You should think carefully on preparing those that cannot reach with their hands to the best mangoes, because soon after those low-hanging mangoes are finished, you will discover that it's only the tall ones. So the issue is, I think Dr. Fadeo put it clearly, it's a great development, but the detail, the devil is in the detail. How prepared are we, and how are we going to make sure so that the elephants don't crush the antelopes or the small ants and all that, but we all survive and flourish. It can be done, but if not carefully done, it may lead to disaster. Thank you.
Thank you, Fadel. Really, really important thoughts to have and thoughts to share with our various players. So I'm a strong advocate for the fact that we have to be involved as citizens. So please, based on these thoughts, speak to your Minister of Agriculture, wherever country you are, speak to your representative. So Ayodele, we want your thoughts on one, getting the youths into these food systems for them to actually run viable businesses, and then coming down to, we know that SMEs need to scale. In light of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, how do we do that in a way that benefits the people that the agreement is designed to benefit? Yes, Ayodele.
Thank you. So on the youth agenda, I think we've, speaking about in Africa, we've actually come a long way in the last decade. 10 years ago, when I started doing agriculture, I was, in any federal meaningful meeting, I was the only person that was far lower than 40. But that has changed now. If you talk about agriculture, there's quite a lot of young people playing very important, even at national and regional levels. But then if you look at it on the other side, you look at the productivity. The productivity actually, if you look at the population of people in agriculture, the GDP divided by the population number of people, it's actually declined by drastically over the same period. So there is that part of skill and then know-how. And then a lot of times what we've also seen in the last 3 years is that, technology as a business model works in a lot of sectors. In agriculture, technology works best as an enabler. It helps you drive productivity, but as an enabler. You cannot be in agriculture and then you run a tech business. Technology will not grow the seeds for you and will not harvest and take the grains to the market. So you still have to have hands on the ground. And I think there's a lot of a gray area that needs to be clarified with data and statistics around this particular point. On AFCTA, so the school of thought that I hold is that and I hold the quote is from I'm rephrasing the quote from the former president of AFDB, Dr. Kaberuka, and he says that the last generation got us independence. At the time when they got independence, were we ready for it? No. But do we thank them for doing it today? Yes. So that's my view on the ASCTA. Are we ready for it? No. Should we have it? Yes.
Great, thank you. So we will get ready. We know it's coming. So instead, let's just get ready. Let's get ready. Since we're the generation, we say Africa is a young generation and youths like fasting. So let's get ready quickly. I think to take advantage of it. So thank you very much for your thoughts. Boniface, I see your question in the chat. How can we key into support services provided by AFEX and AGRA? I'm not sure we'll have time to do that, but AFEX and AGRA team members will post links to their organization's information, and when we send the thank you campaign after this session, we would include the information about those organizations so you can reach out to them. Thank you very much. So I want us to close before I welcome Associate Professor Dr. Franklin Wungu. I'm going to close with one question from Nat James, which is something that's like the elephant in the room, especially when you're talking about Africa. He's asking, what is the potential impact of banditry and herdsmen on crop production, and how can we address this? But I think the overall question there is, we're already seeing the insecurity that climate change and changing weather patterns and the changing environment is having on the food system. How can we address this? So you can give your closing thoughts in 1 minute. I'll start with Ayodeji and then we'll go back to everyone else.
It is indeed a big problem, but I see, my view is that security and banditry is a symptom of a bigger problem, and the big problem is unemployment and food insecurity. A food insecure country is an insecure country, period. If we put 10% of our national budget, which today it's about 20% of our annual budgets, if you put that 10% on agriculture, we wouldn't need it in 5 years' time. If we don't, we'll continue, we'll be in this situation or in even a worse situation.
Thank you. So the need for citizen participation, we know that at the end of the day, government plays a huge role. So please play your role as a citizen as well, whether as an SME or as an individual. Roland, and then we'll close with Dr. Fadel, who can probably speak from a regional, because not something that's just unique to Nigeria. Roland?
Thank you very much. So adding on to Ayodeji, that it's a manifestation of a root cause, of a cause below it. And the question to us is, do we have tools, capacities to be able to redirect such type of energy from either young people or anyone which is used negatively into issues of violence and all that? It takes us to mindset change. And I've seen countries like Uganda and other countries right now, also Malawi and Zambia, who are actually now pushing towards mindset change, especially for the young people to be able to manage that energy and redirect it positively. And I think that's one thing that we have to pursue, and redirect that energy from the young people and whosoever is affected by those root causes, so that we direct it towards positive productivity. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Fadel?
I think it's, I want to end with a message of hope. Right? I mean, not that I'm not aware of some of the big challenges. I totally agree with my colleague that these are symptomatic of a bigger crisis. I think just to give an example, when I see how our young men and women are throwing themselves into the sea to go to Europe. Somehow, as a continent, as a generation, we have lost the battle over the imagination of our own children. So there is something bigger than just jobs. I think people are not dreaming anymore. What our forefathers and grandfathers did is dreaming of independence. Even our generation, dreaming of getting social ascension through education and building something, we are losing it. I think there is something significant that needs to be done. And this is why I want to echo your idea around mobilizing citizens around who we are and our projects, and making sure that we have a project and a plan for everybody. Now, having said that, you cannot do that if you don't have a livelihood system. The majority of our people are rural, and the majority of farmers are women, and you have a ruralization and womenization of poverty. If you have such a concentration of challenges on certain segments, it's an indication of a governance crisis. Therefore, we need to rebuild and rebuild better. The message of hope is not only our country, but the whole world around the food system is putting metrics around progress for all, healthy diet, employment, and sustainability. I think the challenge to all of us now, entrepreneurs, leaders, etc., is how can we deliver that with our people? And again, to Roland's point, I think we need to have a self-drive mindset. Nobody will do it for you. You have to be able to envisage success, to be mobilized, and to operate in a positive environment. I think there is significant progress. I mean, we can look at a glass half full of half empty. I want to look at the half full. Over the last few years, each of our countries have made significant progress. We can do more. We should demand more as citizens, but take responsibility. In Southern Africa, they have what they call Ubuntu. I am because you are. But there is also, and I think is the other side of the coin is you should be the change that you want to see. I think we all have a responsibility to make it happen. With that, I would thank you for the opportunity. It was a great meeting. I'm glad. And thank you to my fellow panelists and for the opportunity. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm so grateful for our participants that have stayed with us. I really I feel it that you really felt this was worth your while. So thank you very much. Thank you to all our speakers. And I'll hand you over now to Dr. Franklin Ugu, who will share some thoughts and then close us out. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, However, I think you've done very well with your moderation. And I also thank all the panel members, contributors, Fadel, Ayodeji, Rolands, Professor Wechia. I think that what is common, what I keep hearing, I'm not even sure. I think that the best thing for me to say is just to say that I support the last speakers, and that should be the, and because I support them every other time. I'm not sure it's good for me to start repeating what you've said, because all that you've said, I'm not disputing any of them. So I support all you've contributed, but for the purposes of what we are doing, now what is common across all we've said is that small and medium enterprises remain the bedrock for us to succeed, either before COVID-19 or even after COVID-19. But COVID-19 has made it clear that we are in a crisis. And that means that it is important that we now rethink or strengthen or enhance that support that we provide for MSMEs, so that they can actually, because they are the fulcrums upon which we can address issues of poverty, unemployment, insecurity, and all that. And in the first panel session, of course, by Jubril, Bankole, and Neka, it's clear that COVID-19 has affected so many sectors. However, some sectors are also doing well. So for example, businesses that are driven mainly by technology seems to not to be affected as much as other sectors with regards to COVID-19. So presently, people will rather save than spend, so the economy contracts further. And because people are really wondering, how are we getting on, and how are we going to survive this period? So everybody is careful in terms of the way they are spending, even though we know that disposable income has significantly reduced. So, and of course, if it has reduced, it means that issues of poverty has increased, because we have had job losses, and we have also had businesses closing. So all this, of course, is like a cyclic process. So there's COVID-19, jobs will be lost, people will lose their incomes. Some of the ones that don't lose their jobs, the salaries will be reduced. That means disposable income will definitely reduce, and that means that poverty will definitely increase, and all that. But in addition to that, issues of climate change remains a very important factor that we also have to look into. Even though there is an increasing awareness and collaboration particularly from the government, it is still something that needs to be properly advocated, and more effort, more partnership, more engagement still required to ensure that entrepreneurs, MSMEs, and government agencies, our policymakers, and even other stakeholders all appreciate the importance of it, so that all of us can join hands to ensure that we address the issue of climate change and other risks that we face. So that will also help to increase the use of renewable energy, and that will help us to achieve a better outcome. On the second panel, that will look at food security, eliminating the bottlenecks in achieving zero hunger. What I think that is also very clear is that it's something that is needed for more collaboration, especially in terms of how do we help small farmers and young ones to understand, to want the small farmers to scale up, and then our younger, the youth, to also appreciate that agriculture is also the way to go, and they can also survive using through agriculture. Interestingly, Deji is a very good, is a role model to say that agriculture is not for old people or is not for poor people. So it is really, I think we should use it more in terms of promoting agriculture to show that it's something that the young people can do. And with regards to what they are doing in AFEX, what they are doing in Babangona, what other agencies that are supporting, like what Larry is doing, what Fadel is doing, what Roland is doing, all this will come to, we'll have to see how we can strategically or systematically increase what all these efforts to really help to scale up agricultural production and also to engage our youths into it. Interestingly as well, as we mentioned about in technology, it's clear that with technology that so many things can be done. Some of the bottlenecks that we had before can also be reduced and will achieve a better outcome. So on this note, I say a very, very big thank you to everybody that have attended, and I'm sure you really, really enjoyed it. And of course, there is this old Honda car that is popularly called The Discussion Continues. So it hasn't ended, so we'll continue the discussion, but I think today we've had enough of this discussion. So thank you again, and thank you very much for attending. Back to you, Aurora. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I support the last speaker. I have nothing to add. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to all our speakers, all our attendees, and please stay in touch with us. Please stay in touch with us. We look forward to working with you and learning more from you, and also sharing our lessons with you. And we hope very soon we'll be able to be in a hall together in LBS, and we'll have a very nice meal. So usually that's the only thing missing in this conference. You would have had a very nice LBS 3-course meal. So I'm sorry about that, but it's beyond our control. So thank you very much, everyone. And discussion continues, but please take this away that at the end of the day, we can do our individual things, but at the end of the day, we also need to be engaged with what's happening in our countries, in our communities. So please go to your government's website, get the phone number of your representative, call them, speak to them, get involved. If not, it won't change. So thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jude,
Thank you.
our
Bye,
goodbye,
everybody.
please.
Bye.
Bye. Yes, thank you, Jubril. Thank you, Neka. Thank you, Bankole. I see you all. Jude, are we ready?
Ndine Margaret Chabweteka ndegala yake liyali ndili wang'ono sindathe kulemba ndikuwerenga fa makolo wanga adali ovutika ndi adandisiya kumwalira ndikukwatula ndi bambo amene ndali nawo ndi adandisiya sadamwalira chaka chino chatene koma ndisakutha kuwerenga ndipo sindimatha kugona usiku wonse umene ndimakhala ndimakhala ndikuganizana kuti kodi ndidzadziwa kulemba dzina langa, kodi ndidzadziwa kuwerenga. Nditabwera project Nkhanga kuyamba skulu ine ndinalolera ukalowa nawo. Lero ntamva dzanali kuti amayi mwapambana. Lero ine ndakhala nkhati kapena ndili kwina kwake dziko lina la chilendo. Lero ndikuliyembekezera loti ine ndikasangalale. Ndilibe sabateli yese kati kakavala zijazi balibe kantu komano kwathu kuno. Ndipo ndimanyada nalo ndikamaenda. Chimene chindisangalatsa kwambiri kuona anzanga mmene amachitira kuwerenga. Ine ndimakumbirana naso nditawerenga. Kuti magulu aliwonse obwerawo ndizikhala nawo sindikhala opatuka chifukwa ndikudziwa kulemba.